This was no way for Jaime's life to end, hung on the sword of some overzealous lord. If he was to die, he would die with a sword in his hand. I would make a valuable hostage, boy. Jaime said as he stared at the young lordling. You could trade me for your father. Ronal Arryn turned his eyes away from Jaime and began to cry. Tears dripped down his cheeks and rage quivered in every bone of his body. What has Cersei done? Ronal Arryn turned back to Jaime, his tears still staining his cheeks. Trade you for my father? He asked. I already have my father. He replied as he nodded at Lord Yohn Royce. Lord Yohn turned around and picked up a chest that Jaime had not yet seen. He opened it and inside rested a tarred and rotting skull along with 2 hands. Your son sent my father's head back to me in my mother's hands. You're as valuable to me as your son and your sister made my father and my mother valuable to them. I will give you death. Jaime's heart dropped in his chest. What had Cersei done? Was she a fool? The time had come to extend the hand of peace and instead Cersei had extended the hand of war. How many more men like Unwin and Alec had she doomed to die because she could not keep her son in hand? He's your son too. Jaime squashed that voice in his head as quickly as it had come. Cersei and Joffrey still have your sister, my lord. A familiar voice said and Jaime turned to see Selyn Corbray standing there, with a drawn Lady Forlorn clutched in his hands. To kill him now would be to see your sister killed as well. Perhaps you should keep him hostage for now, until you have your sister back. And if Joffrey or Cersei do anything to your sister you can still kill him. Ronal nodded at Selyn Corbray. Take him to the dungeons then. Let it be known though, at the first sign of harm to my sister, or at the first trouble that Sir Jaime shall cause that he will lose his head, and I will send it back to Cersei clutched in the hands of every Lannister I kill in this war. Notes. So the timeline goes something like this. They rode north for a week, before they came across Ronal and then Ronal pursued them for 2 weeks before Jaime got captured. Please, leave me a comment and let me know what you think. I would really love to hear your opinion as it keeps me inspired and helps me to write the next chapter. Chapter 23, Davos I, the Pirate King. Summary. Davos arrives on Dragonstone and tries to help Stannis. Notes. Okay, here is most probably my favorite character that I have made for this story. He's sort of a Euron Greyjoy of the North, and he is central to more than one canon character's story arc. I hope you like him as much as I have enjoyed writing him because I have spent months planning this character out. Please, I'm begging you, tell me what you think of him and what you think of the chapter as a whole. I have put so much work into this and I want to know if this character is worth the work I did for him. So without further ado, here he is, Torrhen Snow, the bastard of the Saltsmoor. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Davos hadn't seen Dragonstone in years. The last time he had been here he had still been a smuggler and Aerys Targaryen had yet to lose his throne and his life. He found that little had changed about the place since Stannis Baratheon took up residence in the grim fortress. It was still a sprawling, ugly mess of fused black stone and more gargoyles than Davos dared to count. Sulfur and smoke still lingered in the air and a pervading sense of something unnatural hung about the place. He had sailed down with his little fleet of 5 ships and 2 of his sons, Dale and Marek. Dale was a captain of his own ship, while Marek served Davos as his first mate on the Black Bether. Davos' other 2 elder sons, Allard and Mathos, sailed with the pirate king of the Stepstones, Torrhen Snow. Both of them had traveled the world with their king, and Allard had been with him when he had fled the north in his blaze of glory. Allard had been by his side throughout all of his adventures and Davos knew that Torrhen Snow considered Allard to be one of his closest and most trusted companions. So trusted that he had named him captain of his second most powerful ship, the White Leviathan. Torrhen's own ship, the Black Leviathan, was the greatest ship that Davos had ever laid eyes on. It was bigger than even the Ebenence whaler that Davos had once seen from afar. It had 5 masts of ironwood and sails 4 times the size of Davos' own ship. Davos had overseen part of the ship's construction himself, and he knew that no ship that sailed the seas could hope to defeat such a beast in battle. Mathos had joined Torrhen later, stealing away in the night and joining his brother in Braavos. The last Davos heard of Mathos he had been appointed the second mate on the Grey Leviathan, the 3rd most powerful ship in Torrhen Snow's fleet. We have ships approaching. Marek said as he joined him at the tiller of the Black Bether. Davos had seen them already, sailing to cut off their approach to the docks of Dragonstone. "Hoist the flags," Davos replied, "and send word to our ships to fly the Onion banner." Marek nodded and rushed away to do his bidding, while Davos carefully watched the ships approaching. They flew a strange banner, one that Davos had not seen before. It bore the Baratheon stag enclosed within a burning heart of red flame. By his own admission, Davos knew little of lords and their games, but Davos knew that to spurn his family's banner would only weaken Stannis' claim. On the masts of his own ships, his own banners, along with the banner of the Starks, were raised. The Baratheon ships responded by blowing a long horn blast and turning away. Davos saw a dock being cleared for his landing, and called for Marek. "Send signal to the other ships to wait behind until I have spoken with Stannis. They will land once I am assured of our safety." Marek nodded, and then the final hustle began to prepare the ship for landfall. Sailors rushed about, hauling in sails, strapping down loose crates and manning the oars. Davos guided the tiller gently and slipped through the lines of the Royal Navy that had declared for Stannis. His ship docked at the empty spot with the gentlest of scrapes against the pier, and then his men were casting down ropes and the dock hands tied her secure. He patted the ship's tiller fondly. She wasn't as familiar to him as his own smuggling ship, but for this voyage he had been forced to leave that ship at home. A solid clunk of an oaken ramp being lowered brought Davos back to where he was now. He looked up and found Marek waiting for him at the ramp. "Wait here," he told him. "At the first sign of trouble, cast off and flee back north to home. If you can't make it there, then flee for the Stepstones." Marek nodded, and Davos glanced about one final time before descending to the island where a would-be king lay in wait. On the docks he found Sir Andrew Estermont waiting for him, along with a retinue of 20 men. "Sir Andrew," Davos greeted with a small nod of his head. He had first met Sir Andrew during the siege of Storm's End, when Stannis had the boy as his squire. Sir Andrew was much older now, but still Stannis relied on him, and Davos knew that Stannis did not surround himself with fools. "Onion Lord," Sir Andrew replied, though Davos noted with relief that the name was not said as insult like so many others used it as. "King Stannis wishes to see you in his quarters. I am to escort you there." Davos nodded and followed Sir Andrew as they departed the dock. "So Stannis has declared for the throne then?" Davos asked as he strode beside Sir Andrew. "His Grace will speak to you in his chambers." Davos realized the conversation was going to get him nowhere, and instead spent the rest of the walk determining Stannis' strength. In the docks rested at least 100 ships, and Davos saw the sails of many more upon the horizon. Men marched to and fro, and yet for all their numbers Davos still felt that there was too few, especially for a man that wanted to be king. Sir Andrew led him through the gates of Dragonstone and into the castle proper. Around him, men were preparing for war. Nearby he could see men getting fitted for arms and armor, while somewhere behind him he could hear the clang of a smith hard at work. Something felt off about Dragonstone on this day though, a fear and fanatical miasma that hung about every man's eyes. When Davos was finally brought before the doors to the chamber of the painted table, he could feel the tension rolling off the men around him. Something very strange was going on, to be sure. Sir Andrew opened the door and Davos stepped inside. Around the room, braziers burned fiercely, filling the room with a stifling heat. Stannis himself had changed very little from when Davos had seen him last. He had put on a lot of weight, and lost a lot of hair, but his eyes were still the same, and so too was the way he carried himself. He was still the man of iron that would break before he would bend. With him was a man he did not recognize and a woman he assumed to be Stannis' wife. Stannis looked up from the table before him when Davos walked in, but his expression did not change. Davos inclined his head to Stannis. "My lord," Davos said as he reached into his pocket and withdrew the shining white knucklebone and Lord Stark's letter. "You have called and I have come. You are talking to a king." The unknown man snapped, "Address him as such." "Quiet, Sir Axel," Stannis ground out. "I have need of this man's counsel, and until now as far as I know he was unaware I was a king." "Are you?" Davos asked. "Have you claimed the throne?" "Claimed?" Stannis spat. "Why should I need to claim what is rightfully mine? Duty demands that it be given to me, that the lords of these kingdoms bend the knee." Rightfully yours? Davos asked. Did not your brother have sons? Does their claim not come before yours? Their claim would come before mine had he any true-born ones. Stannis snarled the words out in half a growl before thrusting a piece of paper at him. Read, he commanded. Davos snatched the paper from Stannis' grasp and quickly scanned it. It was the same letter that Eddard Stark had shown him before he had left Winterfell bound for here. It seemed that more than one man believed Joffrey and Tommen to be the bastard spawn of an incestuous relationship. Davos grunted in reply and then handed the letter back. If the throne is rightfully yours, why have you not claimed it yet then? Stannis ground his teeth and stared out the window. The prince who is promised shall sweep aside all the pretenders to his throne. The Lord of Light shall see his champion come into his kingdom. An exotic voice interrupted them both. Davos turned to see an exotic woman sitting in the shadows. Young and beautiful, she was garbed in flowing red robes while a red ruby glistened at her collar. Who are you? Davos asked, bewildered at her presence. Melisandre of Aes High. The red woman replied, servant of Ahol. Ahol. The red god. Davos asked as he turned to Stannis. What is she doing here? She has power. Stannis responded. Power? Davos asked. What sort of power? How many swords does she bring? How many ships does she have? Because with all due respect your grace, that is the power that will see you seated on the Iron Throne, not Eastern mysticism. Show respect to the Lord of Light's chosen. Stannis' wife screeched. He is the prince that is promised, bone amongst salt and smoke. He shall deliver us from the long night. Prince that is promised. Davos exclaimed, born amongst salt and smoke. The long night. Are you hearing yourselves right now? Enough. Stannis' voice was like a whip, cutting through the air. Leave me, all of you. I wish to speak to Lord Davos alone. His wife and her brother got up and left, glaring at Davos as they did so. The red woman smiled at him warmly and the ruby at her throat glittered darkly. Davos shivered coldly as she left. The long night, your grace? Davos asked. I come from the north, and even there, the long night is spoken of as no more than a myth to most people and an ancient and dead god to others. Stannis shot him a dark look, before nodding at the chair that Sir Axel had just vacated. Sit, he commanded. Davos took a seat and looked at the table before him. Spread across it were markers representing the strength of each kingdom. Lions and falcons were scattered throughout the riverlands, while roses and stags had gathered in the reach. In the far north, the wolves littered everywhere from Moat Cailin to the lands beyond the wall, while on Dragonstone stood a solitary burning heart. Look. Stannis said as he swept his hand over the painted table. There are enemies and claimants to my kingdom everywhere I turn. Bastards, brothers and pretenders tear my kingdoms apart. And here I sit because the lords that are meant to swear fealty to me as their rightful king have betrayed me. Even your own liege lord spurns me. I send him a raven demanding him to swear fealty and he sends me 5 ships and an onion lord. You demanded he give fealty to you? Davos asked. As he did for Robert. Do you think Robert ever demanded Ned Stark's fealty and loyalty? Stannis stewed in silence, while his eyes roiled with an emotion that Davos could not identify. Ned was always the brother Robert wanted. I wasn't worthy of Robert's love, and now it seems I am not worthy of his servants either. Stannis' voice was small, smaller than Davos had ever heard it before. It shook slightly at the word brother and trembled at love. Davos leaned forward in his seat. Earn the trust of your dead brother's servants. Earn their admiration and respect. Earn their armies and gold. You do not need this red priest. You can win their armies to your side. Prove the true claim is yours. You and I both know the boy king that sits the Iron Throne. When he mucks up, and he will, be there to fill the void he leaves behind. Show the kingdoms that you are worthy of the throne you pursue are rightfully yours. Stannis rose from his seat and turned to look out over Blackwater Bay. You rebuke me for surrounding myself with Eastern mysticism, and yet at least that is a power that is here now, supporting me. So tell me, Lord Davos, if you would not have me use Eastern mysticism, then what should I use to gain my throne? Swords and ships. Davos replied. Steel and blood. Stannis snorted. Swords and ships I have plenty of, but I have no men to wield them and few men to sail them. Where am I to get these men from, Lord Davos? My own kingdoms have spurned me of what is rightfully mine. Davos paused for a second, considering. Stannis was right. All of Westeros had spurned his claim, and because of that he had no strength to stake his claim. Davos' eyes fell upon a corner of that painted table, the end of the Arm of Dawn. I'll admit I don't know much of what Lord Stark plans. Davos admitted, but I can assure you that if you keep that red woman by your side, he will never support your claim. Stannis ground his teeth in annoyance. But if you insist on keeping her by your side and you need ships, Davos said. I can get you 600. You need men? He asked. I can find you 25,000. And where does such an army exist? Stannis spat. You just said that Lord Stark will not support me with the Red Woman by my side. He won't. Davos affirmed. But that doesn't mean others won't. Davos reached over for a paper map and rolled it open. Here sits a king. Davos said as he pointed out a place on the map. A king like you that is struggling to have people recognize him as one. A pirate king. Stannis sneered as he stared at the stepstones. But a king nonetheless. Davos replied. A king with 600 ships and 25,000 men. 25,000 pirates. Stannis argued. My own sons amongst them. Davos replied. This king has a thirst for gold and recognition. Give him both and he will see you seated upon the Iron Throne. Stannis was silent for the longest time. Davos waited patiently. This is why I wanted you in my service all those years ago, Lord Davos. Stannis eventually said. You make me wish I had more smugglers in my service and less lords and knights. Your advice is sound. Send word to the Pirate King. It will do no harm to my cause to see how much he wants for his armies. Davos nodded and turned from the king, seeking out his own sons at the docks. He found Dale first. Go find Torrhen and your brothers. Davos told him. Bring them here and tell them that King Stannis wishes to buy his services. Sail now, sail fast. The reign of the true king depends upon you. Next to him Stannis was as still as a rock as they watched the three ships approach over the horizon. His hands were clenched behind his back, while his eyes were set in stone and his jaw locked. Behind him his court had gathered, though not all of them looked happy with who Stannis had stood at his right hand. Stannis had spurned his castellan and his wife, as well as the lords who had attended him. Instead it was Davos who stood at his right hand, in a position he still did not think he should have been. The approaching ships were flying over the waves, going faster than Davos had thought ships were possible of going. The ships were so large and fast that they created their own waves in the wake, a foaming line of water that stretched for leagues behind them. As the ships got closer, Davos finally saw in the flesh the ship that he had seen on paper all those years ago. The Black Leviathan was just as grand as he had supposed she would be. 500 feet long, with 5 masts and a prow and ram of black steel. 2 chains extended from holes high in the prow of the ship, taut as a bowstring and attached to something underneath the water. On the foredeck Davos could see 2 heavy ballista, mounted on both port and starboard sides, while along the sides of the ships hundreds of broken shields and tattered banners hung. The shields and banners were a sign of Torrhen's conquests, and Davos knew that some of those banners and shields had come from as far away as the lands beyond the Sunset Sea as well as the Jade Sea. By his Burn Salt Stark's own confession, Torrhen Snow would have been perhaps the most capable admiral of his age, if not all time. And 2 of Davos' own sons sailed with him, one of them his most trusted right hand, a captain of Torrhen's second most powerful ship. It made Davos both swell with pride, and quail with shame. Did his sons serve a great admiral, a king? Or did they serve a pirate? No doubt they thought they served a king, but Allard had always been the most impulsive of all his sons, and Marek wasn't far behind. He doubted their judgment was entirely sound. A horn blast shattered the air around them, and Davos could make out the giant instrument that made such a sound. Once upon a time it must have been the horn of a fearsome beast, but now it was hollowed out and racked in bands of silver and black steel. At least 7 feet long, Davos could see it attached to the prow of Torrhen's ship, being blown by some soul with large lungs, most probably one of the sons of Lord Alaric White Estoc. All 8 of his bastard sons and 3 of his true-born ones had been part of Torrhen's original 40 sons that fled the north with him. The sound petered out, and as one the ships slowed and then stopped. It was almost uncanny how in sync the ships were. The taut chains at the front of the ships slackened once the ships stopped and fell into the water, trailing along the hull. Once the ships had fully stopped, sailors seemed to spring from everywhere, clambering down the rigging, emerging from below decks, and Davos even saw one pop out of an empty barrel. They swarmed about, lowering boats and nets and readying themselves for war, it seemed. In total it was 3 rowboats from each ship that set out. 9 ships in total, each holding 10 men. Behind Stannis, Sir Axel Florentine scrambled to increase the amount of guards they had around. He had made his displeasure with this course of action known from the very beginning. He would have preferred to attack King's Landing at once, before a sizable defence could be mustered from the lords of the Crown lands. This was the course Stannis had chosen though, and it was the one his subjects would follow. The ships grew closer and closer, and Davos could make out the faces of the men on board. They were all northern from what Davos could tell. He could see the 6 White Estoc bastards and all 3 of Lord White Estoc's true-born sons, as well as Rickon Riverstock, Hoarfrost Umber, Roose Ryswell and Argus Seastock. And then of course there was also both of his own sons, and finally the greatest and most infamous of them all, Torrhen Snow, the bastard of the Saltsmoor and pirate king of the Stepstones. He had grown much since Davos had last seen him. All the childhood he once had on him had faded away and left his cheekbones sharp, the planes of his face hard and masculine. A smattering of pox scars graced his left cheek, while an unruly mop of dark brown hair ran amok on top of his head. He wasn't a classically handsome man, but it wasn't his looks that drew people to him. His eyes burned fiercely with purpose and anger, while his mouth was twisted into a wry smirk. Resting in between his lips was one of the smoking pipes favored by the sailors of Ibben, and every few seconds he blew a long puff of dark green smoke that ran out of his mouth like water, pooling at the bottom of the rowboat in which he sat. He was dressed in black leathers, covered by a thick black cloak, as were all his men. Torrhen was separated however by a silver sash pinned to his chest, while the shoulders of his cloak were marked with his personal sigil, a black leviathan with silver highlights. The small towboats scraped along the sides of the low dock, and the pirate king's court leapt to assemble themselves. Some of the men formed an honor guard for their king, while others rushed about unloading the many chests that sat in the boats. Torrhen Snow stepped off the little rowboat and onto dry land, and his men snapped to attention with straight backs and drawn cutlasses. What men remained carefully stacked the chests in a neat pile before the feet of their king. Torrhen took one final puff of his pipe, before flinging the expensive mahogany pipe into the waters behind him. He watched as it sunk beneath the waves, before blowing out the smoke of his last puff. He watched it pool at his feet and then sink beneath the floorboards of the dock before turning around. Only then did he turn his gaze to the king awaiting him. He strode down the docks slowly, gazing at every member of Stannis' court that was gathered on the dock. Eventually he stopped before Stannis' wife, before bowing low and seizing her hand. "I have traveled far and wide, through the north of the Shivering Sea as far south as the tip of Sot Horios, and I have even explored the coastline of Aldhose," Torrhen said, his voice as soft as a whisper. "And in all my years of travel and sightseeing never have I seen a woman with a moustache like yours." Slyss Baratheon flinched as if she had just been struck, before she yanked her hand back. Her brother surged forward and went to seize Torrhen by the lapels of his cloak, but was stopped by 2 of the guards that followed in his wake. "You dare!" Sir Axel screamed, "Pirate scum! Repeat those words when my blade is drawn." Torrhen smirked at the man before turning back to the king. "Stannis," he said, his voice dulcet and calming. "Lord of Dragonstone, scion of House Baratheon and would-be king of Westeros." Stannis did not physically respond, only stared at him coldly. So many pretenders. So many claimants. So many enemies. So few friends. "The same could be said of you," Stannis replied. Torrhen smiled. "It could." He laughed, "But I have many swords and ships to defend and keep my kingdom, and you have few of either." "I have legitimacy though," Stannis replied, "my claim is the true claim. And though swords and ships may not be mine in abundance now, who is to say what tomorrow will bring? Perhaps it will bring a new king." Torrhen replied, "Perhaps 2 kings. 1 king." Stannis replied tersely. Westeros has one king. Me. And so too does the Stepstones. One king. Me. Torrhen replied. Where once it was the denizen of 100 captains and 100 kings and 100 smugglers, now they all answer to me. I am an undisputed king of a small smattering of islands in the middle of the narrow sea. But do you know what it is that burns me more than my small domain? Stannis watched Torrhen warily, before shooting a glance at Davos. It is the fact that only my own men call me king. Torrhen continued, only those who live under my rule recognize me as a king. From Volantis to Sunspear they spurn my crown, mocking me as the pirate king. Much in the same way that your kingdoms have spurned your claim. You want recognition. Stannis stated, a light of understanding dawning in his eyes. I want more than just that. Torrhen snarled as he clenched his right fist. I want lies. I want Myr. I want Tiosh. I want to see them knelt before me, proclaiming me as their king and paying me tribute. I want to see Volantis tremble before my might and for Pentos to quail before me. I want to see Braavos recognize me as a king and for all of Westeros to know my name. I want my enemies to fear me and my friends to love me. I want for men to sing of my name for 1,000 years and I want to be remembered for 10,000. I was born a bastard, King Stannis, but I have no intention of being remembered as one. Stannis nodded slowly, before chewing on his bottom lip. It seems that we can help each other then. With the backing of the King of Westeros behind you, who would dare to deny you your crown? Many men. Torrhen replied. Has not the free cities defied the kings of Westeros before? Let them. Stannis replied. Theirs is the defiance of a summer. Help me gain my kingdom, and I will see you delivered into yours. Torrhen didn't reply, just observed the true king. Your kingdom first though. He asked, why not mine? What do you want then? Stannis snapped, what would it take for you to agree to take mine first? Gold. Torrhen replied with a dark smile. Lots and lots of gold. If I am to commit to your cause before mine, my own fledgling kingdom would suffer. I would have to pull ships and men away from the colonies I protect in Sothroios, colonies that bring me much money. Gold, recognition and your own men once your war is done will buy the price of my ships and men. Torrhen plucked a dagger of Valyrian steel from his belt, before running it across his calloused palm. So then, King Stannis, he asked as blood dripped down his hand and onto the ground beneath his feet. Do we have an agreement? Stannis stared at the extended hand for the longest time, before flicking his gaze to Davos. Davos nodded encouragingly. Don't do it, Your Grace. Sir Axel cried. Align yourself with the Pirate King and all of Westeros will spurn your claim twice over. And who would you have him align with, Sir Axel? Torrhen spat, his face dark with wrath. A whore of the Red God. Said whore only smiled at Torrhen and stepped forth as her ruby choker glowed with the light of burning brazier. The Lord of Light shall not be mocked. She lectured, his power is above all. Power. Torrhen exclaimed, before he burst out laughing. Power. You think your god has power? Around him some of Torrhen smiled in amusement while others shifted uncomfortably. Davos noted Allard's look drifted to some place far away. I've seen power. Torrhen cried as tears ran down his cheeks. Davos could not tell if they were tears of laughter or terror, or maybe both. True power, power that drives the breath from your body and renders your god as pathetic as a strand of hay to a sword of Valyrian steel. I've seen power that could tear this world apart and then put it back together in the blink of an eye, power that leaves you short of breath and unsure of your own existence. I've seen sights that would drive most men insane and I've gazed upon monsters greater than even the dragons of Valyria. I've sailed the named seas, unnamed seas and seas that no man has ever gazed on before. I've come across 10,000 gods in my travels, horse gods and fire gods, gods made of gold with gemstone eyes, gods carved of cedar wood, gods chiseled into mountains, gods of empty air. I know them all. I have seen their peoples garland them with flowers, and shed the blood of goats and bulls and children in their names. And I have heard the prayers, and heard the gods' silence too. Gods are no more than just splinters of magic that once existed in this world, and your god Torrhen paused as he snorted and shook his head in amusement, your god is the weakest splinter of them all. Torren advanced on the priest of the Red God. So please, he begged her, pray for your God to strike me down. You better pray too though that he doesn't fail, because if he does, you'll find out just why the sight of the Black Leviathan is so feared throughout everywhere I've ever been. You'll find out why those who wish me harm live in fear and those who care for me live in comfort. You'll find an enemy unlike any other you've faced before. You'll find an enemy that sees right through everything, crone. To Davos' surprise, the young woman quailed at the last word of Torren's no, before she dropped her gaze and fled. Torren glared down Sir Axel before turning back to the king. So then, King Stannis? He asked again, the cut on his hand still dripping blood, do we have an agreement? Stannis stepped forth and yanked his leather gloves off, before thrusting them through his belt. He snatched his own dagger from his belt, and while it was not Valyrian steel it was still incredibly sharp. A quick cut and his own blood was flowing from his hand. I then. Stannis growled, his voice grave and of iron, we shall have an agreement, King Torren. And with that he gripped Torren's nose bleeding hand and shook it once. Their blood mingled and Torren Snow, king of the Stepstones and claimant of Myr, Tiosh and Lies nodded satisfactorily. An agreement bound in blood. He stated. Break it at your own peril, King Stannis. As I warned the Red Whore, I know power. Davos had never been frightened by Torren before, he had known him since he was 4. But a shiver of terror ran through him regardless, and he wondered just what it was that Torren had seen. It had struck wonder and terror deep into his soul for all to see, and it horrified Davos that his son had seen it too. Notes. As I said at the start, please let me know what you think. Chapter 24, Jon 6, Craster and his keep. Summary. Jon arrives at Craster's keep. Notes. I am so sorry for how delayed this is, but my internet has been down. It's still not working properly, but I've managed to get a tenuous connection for now, so hopefully I'll be able to keep updating. Next update on Friday as per normal, if I have internet. Chapter text. Jon had thought he had known what the cold was. How wrong he had been. Right now, the worst of Winterfell snowstorm seemed like a warm summer breeze compared to the biting wind that was cutting through him right now. He huddled deeper into his furs, but it did little to help. In the distance he could see a small light shining through the darkness. Uncle Benjen he told him that the light was the cook fires of Craster's keep. If those lights were 10 miles away or 10 meters though, no one seemed to know. The Wargs bonded refused to go and look, preferring to stay close to their masters. Ghost seemed to be the exception to that rule, having been missing for the last 3 miles. One of the rangers of the Night's Watch sniffed the air. Smoke. He growled, we must be close by now. I've been smelling smoke for the last 5 miles, Dale. Another grizzled ranger said, it doesn't mean we are almost there. It just means the wind is picking up. He was right, Jon mused, as another gust blew through their large party. The wind was picking up. Better not to be at Craster's. Another ranger put in. I'd rather be freezing my ass off in these woods than warm in his halls. A shiver ran through the ranger. Even wildlings fear him. Wildlings fear all they don't understand. Jeor Mormont rumbled, and wildlings have never been known for their understanding. At this the rangers laughed. That's true. Dale cried, they say Tormund Giantsbane slept with a bear. How thick must your skull be to fuck a bear? The men laughed harder until a horseman came bearing down on them from the north. Half the rangers had drawn their swords from their scabbards before they realized it was one of their own party. Thorin Halfhand had left the company in the presence of his lord, and Jon's uncle, Benjen Hardstark. Now he returned alone. Jon spurred his horse forward to meet the man. Thorin! He cried, where is my uncle? Thorin shook his cowl from his head, and wet his lips with a wineskin. Back with Craster. He rasped, the man demanded he stay, while I brought the rest of our party to meet with him. You left my uncle alone with that man. Of course I did. Thorin replied, the Hardstark has been fighting and killing wildlings since he was 14 years old. Even if Craster was inclined to try something, he will prove no match for your uncle. There is nothing to fear with Craster. Jeor Mormont informed Jon as he reined his horse in next to him. He has always been a friend to the Watch. When rangers are in need of food or shelter, Craster has always given it freely. John grunted in reply, unwilling to concede defeat. How far away is Craster? Less than a mile. Thorin replied. Just up the next curve of this stream. We'll be there within the next hour. John nodded and turned to Garth Mormont. Spread the word that we ride hard until we reach Craster's. I wish to be resting beneath a real roof before the time that the sun has set below the tree line. Garth nodded and spurred his mount away. Around him the word spread that Craster's keep wasn't far, and John noticed the men's attitude picking up. The promise of a night's rest and the possibility of resting in a real hole had inspired the men to keep pushing. The men of the Night's Watch had taken the position as vanguard of their party. They knew these lands better than anyone, though John had sent his uncle and his most trusted men ahead as his scouts. They were the true survivors of these lands, the ones who would make it back even if Mance brought his armies in between them. John's Winter Wolves, led by the Great Jon, took the Positon as the center of his party. John's Winter Wolves were the largest part of his forces, and also the least experienced in these lands. John wanted to make sure they were the best protected from the threats around them. They were followed by the Weirwood warriors and their Lord Commander Roderick Walton, who had taken the position as the rearguard. John had made his commands to Roderick Walton clear. He was to ensure that in the event of an attack from the rear, the Weirwood warriors and men of the Night's Watch could make an organized retreat east to Hardham. John did not fear many things in these lands, but one thing he did fear was having Tormund Jonspan, or worse, Mance Rayder, sweeping behind him and cutting him off from his route south. Then they would be forced to march to Hardham, but that march would be almost as treacherous as bringing battle to a host of wildlings said to be as many as 200,000 strong. John did not fear to face wildlings, but he was well aware of how many men had died at the hands of wildlings. It was because of men like Tormund Giantspan and Mance Rayder and the Thuns that wildlings were still feared. The Thuns had been the ones to drive the Lord of Fort First Fist from his halls as well as being the ones to steal his horses. Never before had wildlings rode, but now they did thanks to the fall of Fort First. A Thun was to be feared. A Thun on a horse was to be avoided. A sharp pang of fear interrupted John's chain of thought. Ghost. Something was wrong. His direwolf was afraid. John could feel the wolf's presence to the northwest of him, but whether Ghost was 1 mile away or 10 only the gods could know. John shivered, before turning back to his host. Either Ghost would make it back or he would not. What John was more worried about was what it was that had frightened a direwolf. The further and further they seemed to push into these lands, the stranger and stranger things seemed. John rode around the bend and finally Craster's keep came into sight. The men around him gave a ragged cheer, though what John saw did not give him much hope. He had never thought to find a stone castle on the far side of the wall, but he had pictured some sort of motte and bailey with a wooden palisade and a timber tower keep. What they found instead was a midden heap, a pigsty, an empty sheepfold and a windowless door and wattle hole scarce worthy of the name. A bad omen. Brynden Bloodstark whispered as he nodded at the gate. The open gate was flanked by a pair of animal skulls on high poles, a bear to one side, a ram to the other. Bits of flesh still clung to the bear skull, John noted as he rode past. And here we are riding through the gates with not one, but 2 Mormonts. Quiver muttered. Just our luck. If he tries anything, John commanded Quiver, anything at all, put an arrow through his eye. Quiver nodded, and strung his bow. The yard was empty save for Thorin Halfhand, and a young girl who dashed away as soon as they arrived. John dismounted his horse and strode through the grim gate, along with his most important captains and companions. His Weirwood warriors had not yet arrived, though John knew that they would not be far behind. Garth. John called, and his loyal squire came running, Longclaw bouncing on his waist. Here am Lord. He cried. Tell the Winter Wolves and Weirwood warriors to set up their tents outside the walls. Only the captains are to enter the compound. And have Roderick Walton come for me as soon as he arrives. Garth nodded and rushed away, and John turned to the Great Jon. Ensure our boundaries are secure. Organize a watch, and tell the sentries to keep an eye on all sides, not just the ones without a wall. The Great Jon bowed his head and strode away, while bellowing commands at those unfortunate enough to be caught loitering within the Great Jon's sight. As John approached the flap of daylight that served as a door, it was thrown open and another young woman rushed out, almost in tears. "And hurry up about it!" a grizzled voice roared from inside. John slipped through before the flap closed and drew the attention of the king of Craster's keep. Once, a long time ago, Craster would have been a powerful man, but now he was nearing the end of his life. His hair was grey and long, and his beard longer. His mouth drooped and his nose was flat, making him look as cruel a man as John had ever seen. When he saw John, he smiled gruesomely. His teeth were rotten and chipped, and John fought the urge to sneer back. "Well, well, well," he said as John approached the light of the fire, "if you aren't a Stark, I am a goat's mother." John smiled coldly and noticed his uncle sitting beside Craster. His uncle's mouth was drawn in a thin line and his eyes were stern. His direwolf was nowhere to be seen. John said as he stepped into the light of the campfire. "I am a Stark. And not just any Stark either." Craster snarled, "A Stark of Winterfell." "You sit beside a Stark of Winterfell." John replied. "No, I don't." Craster sneered. "I sit beside a Stark of Hardham. A hard Stark. A much lesser breed of Stark, I am told. A Stark is a Stark." John growled. "And Starks protect their own." Craster laughed. "He's young, this one," he cried as he elbowed Uncle Benjen in the ribs, "got plenty of bite in him still. He's not completely frozen over like you." Benjen did not respond to Craster's ribbing, instead choosing to ignore it. "Sit, boy," Craster cried, "sit. Have a seat at my right hand. I would have words with you." John strode around the campfire and sat down on the bench to Craster's right. Around him his captains and companions followed suit, and Craster glared at them suspiciously. "Who are these men?" "My men," John replied. "Arthur Glenmore of Rillwater Crossing, Bryden Bloodstark of Bloody Hall, Small Janumber of Last Hearth and Samwell Tarley of Horn Hill. The captains of my winter wolves and my squire, Garth Mormont." "Mormont?" Craster snarled as he squinted at the boy suspiciously. "You aren't related to Gia Mormont by any chance?" Garth crowed as he got to his feet. "He is my grandfather, and he is here as well, so show us all the respect we are due." Craster stilled and John glared at Garth darkly. The boy sunk back down, his face flushed. "Mormont is here?" he asked, his voice dark. For a second, no one dared to answer. Gia Mormont replied as he strode in through the doors of Craster's keep, Roderick Walton trailing in his wake. "I am here. Along with 300 sworn brothers of the Night's Watch." "Crows?" Craster snarled. "When did a blackbird ever bring good to a man's hole, I ask you?" "Never." He spat. "Never. Gia Mormont vouched to us of your character, Lord Craster," Uncle Benjen said as he pulled a wineskin from his belt and filled Craster's horn. "We would not be here, bringing our gifts of wine and gold if it were not for him." "You'd be here," Craster grumbled as he lifted his horn to his lips and took a deep swallow. "It's not me you're here for. You've come for word of Mance. You want to know where everyone has gone." He said it as a statement, not a question. John growled out as he sipped from his own horn of wine. "We've come for Mance. Do you know where he is?" "Mayhaps I do." Craster shrugged. "Mayhaps I don't. I'll admit my old age has fogged my memory a fair bit. There are a few things that can clear my memory though." "Yeah?" Gia Mormont groused. "Like what?" Craster eyed the axe at the old bear's waist greedily. "Had no good southern wine up here for a bear's night. I could use me some wine, and a new axe. Mine's lost its bite, can't have that. I got me some women to protect." "Does that refresh your memory at all?" "A little," Craster replied as he picked up the axe and fingered the edge of it. "I seem to remember someone coming around here, trying to recruit me to the Mance's cause. I just can't seem to remember where it was he wanted me to go." The old bear rolled his eyes. "Just tell me what you want in exchange for the information and I will see it given to you." Craster snorted in amusement. "What I want is nothing you can give me." Craster turned his gaze back to John. "What I want only he can give me." "I've got no fancy axes to give you," John warned, "and I'm in dire need of my sword in these lands." It's not a sword or an axe or even gold I want off you. Craster guffawed. Well then, what is it you want? Jon asked. I'll admit I don't much of your southern customs, but isn't the eldest meant to be the next ruler of the rest of you? The eldest of my father will be the next Lord of Winterfell. Jon replied. And? Craster slavered as he leant forward hungrily. Are you your father's eldest son? Are you the next Lord of Winterfell? Around him his men fingered their weapons nervously. Jon knew not if Craster would be foolish enough to try anything against him, but if he did, Jon doubted he would walk away totally unscathed. The wilderling that could claim the head of the heir of Winterfell would win much renown throughout these lands, and followers would flock to his cause. The axe in Craster's hand gleamed in the torchlight, the well-honed edge as dangerous as that of Valyrian steel in these close quarters. Jon had not thought Craster to be such a man, but it did not bode well. Out of the corner of his eye, he noted Quiver pulling an arrow from his sheath, and knocking it to his drawstring. Jon replied warily. I am my father's eldest son. I will be the next Lord of Winterfell. Craster nodded slowly, a hungry smile etched onto his face, and leant back in his seat. Your father can make lords, I've heard. He named your uncle Lord of Hardham, didn't he? He did. Jon replied coolly. Craster snorted in disbelief. As if Hardham was his to give. I'm as worthy of Hardham as your uncle is, and that is not at all. Do you dispute his claim? Jon asked. Would you like to settle it now? By steel perhaps? Craster sneered. I'm not daft, boy. I'd last 5 seconds in a fair fight against the Hardstuck. It's not Hardham that I'm interested in though. It's the lordships. You want to be named a lord? Uncle Benjen stated. Aye. Craster said as he nodded his head. That sounds good. Lord Craster of Craster's Keep. I want your father and you to recognize all these lands as mine, from Whitetree to the banks of the gorge. It's all mine now, and I want you to recognize me as lord of it. I want your father to send me troops to defend it and claim it. Jon stared at the old man, while his men shuffled nervously. After a moment, Jon burst into laughter. You want to be lord, do you? He mocked. You want to bend the knee and grovel at my feet. I took you for a man of the free folk, Craster, not a kneeler. Craster scowled. I want to be a lord. He insisted. I want you to recognize me as one. And you want all the responsibilities that come with being a lord too, do you? Jon asked. You want to swear an oath of fealty to me, you want to bend the knee to me every time I walk in the room, and you want to send a share of your harvest every year to me. No, Craster stated. I want to be a lord. Jon shook his head. No, you don't. You want to be left alone up here. You want an easy life for the rest of your life. I can't make you a lord, but here is what I can do. Every year 3 wagons of supplies, southern grain, and southern wine and southern meat will be sent north for you. Every year for the rest of your life, it will be yours if you help me now. Tell me all you know of Mance Rayder, and all that and more is yours. Jeor Mormont leant forward in his seat. Every village we have passed has been abandoned. Yours are the first living faces we have seen since we left the wall. The people are gone, whether dead, fled or taken I could not say. The animals as well. Nothing is left. Where have they gone? Craster stewed in silence. They are gone, aren't they? Another black-cloaked ranger said. Gone to join your king. King, cried Mormont's raven. King, king, king. That Mance Rayder. Craster spit into the fire. King beyond the wall. He's no king of mine. What do free folk want with kings? What do free folk want with lordships? Bryden Bloodtook muttered quietly as Craster turned his gaze on the old bear. There's much I could tell you o' Rayder and his doings, if I had a mind. This o' the empty villages, that's his work. You could have found this hole abandoned as well, if I were a man to scrape to such. Craster sneered in anger. He sends a rider, tells me I must leave my own keep to grovel at his feet. I sent the man back, but I kept his tongue. It's nailed to that wall there. He pointed. Might be that I could tell you where to seek Mance Rayder. If I had a mind. At the back of the room, Roderick Walton stepped forth. I could force the knowledge from you. If I had a mind. Everyone in the room tensed in anticipation. Swords were loosened in their scabbards and the hilts of daggers were grasped. Craster grasped the handle of his new axe and rose to his feet. Is this how a man is treated in his own hall? He growled. Roderick Walton stepped forth again, and this time not alone. 2 wolves wandered in through the doorway, and his golden eagle followed suit. Craster paled at the sight of them. Warg. He muttered as he fell back in his chair. Roderick Walton pointed at himself. Warg. He stated, and we're a wood warrior too. I'm a fearsome man to make an enemy of Lord Craster. I've fought kings and lords and peasants and wildlings too. I'm still here, and if my blade could speak it would tell of 100 battles and 1,000 deaths. Don't add your life to that tally. Don't make an enemy of me. Don't make an enemy of us. Help us no, and as Lord John has promised you, we shall help you. Craster nodded shakily. You have one night in my hall, and I'll tell you all I know. But then I'm done with you and I never want to see your like again. You'll eat none of my food, and touch none of my wives. The man who does shall lose his hand. Jeor Mormont nodded stiffly. Your house. Your rules. Craster nodded and took a large gulp from his drinking horn before settling back down with a last distrustful look at Roderick Walton. Get him out of here. He finally said, I don't want his type. Come to think of it, I don't want any of your type. Leave me alone with the crows and the hardstock. At least they are kinder to me than you lot have been. Your house. Your rules. John repeated as he got to his feet. I'll see you outside. He said to Jeor Mormont and his uncle before he slipped outside. Hours later, once the sun had set and the moon was high in the sky, John was roughly woken by a shaking hand. He spun around to find Sam crouched next to him, wrapped in the cloak of one of the Black brothers. Sam, he asked, his voice thick with sleep, what is wrong? Shush, Sam hissed as he put his fingers to his lips. Come with me. John stumbled out of his sleeping furs and shrugged his boots and cloak on, before following Sam out into the darkness. He could barely make Sam out in the darkness, and he struggled to keep up with the husky lordling. Sam. He hissed into the darkness, where have you gone? Come. Came the reply, and hurry. He hurried down the gentle slope and away from Craster's keep, properly awake now. The cold did that to a man in these lands. He found himself thinking of his sisters, perhaps because he had dreamed of them last night. Arya and Deanna would have been running in this cold, racing each other to keep warm. No doubt it would have ended with both picking up sticks and fighting whomever out of John and Artois happened to pass by first. He doubted Alaric would have provided much sport for the girls, he often preferred to sneer at them from afar. Lord John. He heard. Meek and soft. He turned. Crouched behind a tree was the young woman who had fled from him earlier, wrapped in a cloak of brown bear fur so large it almost swallowed her. It's all right, Jilly. Sam said as he approached from behind John. John can help you. John is a Stark. Starks are known for that. Won't Craster be angry with you? John asked quickly, trying to stop this conversation before it even began. He had no clue what she wanted, but he knew it was highly likely he would be unable to give it. My father drank over much of your wine last night. He'll sleep most of the day. Her breath frosted in the air in small nervous puffs. They say lords give justice and protect the weak. She twisted uncomfortably, while Sam patted her back awkwardly. It's all right. He said, just tell him. The poor girl dropped to her knees and burst into tears. Lord, I beg you. Don't beg of me anything. John said coldly. Go back to your hall, you shouldn't be here. We were told not to speak to you. You don't have to speak with me, Lord. Just take me with you when you go, that's all I ask. All you ask? John scoffed as he glared at Sam, as if that were nothing. I'll be your wife, if you like. My father, he's got 19 now, one less won't hurt none. Enough. Sam rumbled quietly. Tell him of why you want to leave, Jilly. Jilly looked at Sam uncertainty for a second before she turned back to John. It's not for me, it's for the baby. If it's a girl, that's not so bad, she'll grow a few years and he'll marry her. But Nella says it's to be a boy, and she's had 6 and knows these things. He gives the boys to the gods. Come the white cold, he does, and of late it comes more often. That's why he started giving them the sheep, even though he has a taste for mutton. Only now the sheep re gone too. Next it will be the dogs, till, she lowered her eyes and stroked her belly. John's blood ran cold. A memory stirred within him, a tale of old Nans from when he was young. All of his siblings had been there, Alaric too, though he was only 2. The wildlings lay down and sleep with the others and birth abominations, half others. John had smiled, but Alaric had frowned. No they don't. He had said. They give their human sons to the others. They don't sleep with them. I saw it in my dreams. John, Artos and his sisters had laughed at their grim little brother with his strange nightmares, but now those memories struck him to his core. What gods? He asked, his voice hollow, half fearing the answer he was about to receive. John was remembering the tales he had heard of Craster and that they'd seen no boys in Craster's keep, nor men either, save Craster himself. The cold gods. She said. The ones in the night. The white shadows. John stole a horrified glance at Sam. If she was telling the truth, this could be the reason for why all the wildlings had disappeared. This could be why Mance was gathering them to his side. To protect them from the cold gods who were coming down upon them all. John turned back to Gilly. Go back to your bed and lay down for the night, he told her. I promise you that you will be free of Craster by the time the night is done. Gilly nodded and rushed away, and John turned to his old friend. I'm sorry, John. Sam said, once I learned of the truth from her though, I knew you would want to know. You did the right thing. John affirmed. But what am I meant to do with the knowledge? What to do with Craster? We are under guest rights. Sam informed him. So we can't move against him. Not all of us. John replied. I partook of no salt nor bread, and I instructed none of the captains of either the Winter Wolves or the Weirwood Warriors to do so. Most of them have not even entered the keep. The Great Yon is also not under guest rights. We can use all of them, 400 Winter Wolves and 300 Weirwood Warriors. We won't even need all of them. Craster is only one man. John stewed on Sam's words for a moment, before making up his mind on what to do. Go find me Roderick Walton and the Great Yon. He instructed him. Bring them to me, along with my uncle, and we shall make up our mind how to deal with them. Sam nodded and rushed away, while John lowered himself to his haunches. Around him the woods were alight with moonlight, and fog hung in the air. From the darkness of the shadows, a white apparition melted out of the moonlight. Ghost's muzzle was coated in blood, and a rabbit hung between his teeth. He scampered over to John, and nuzzled into his chest, before dropping the rabbit at his feet. John ruffled the white wolf's fur, before picking the rabbit up and hanging it from his belt. It would make a wonderful breakfast for himself. Thanks, boy. He whispered. It was as he went to rub his belly that he first noticed the long cut along his back. The blood hadn't even had time to run down his pale fur, before it had frozen over. It had frozen in a long, black line, similar to the blackness that graced the tips of his uncle's ears. What happened to you? He asked as he prodded the blackness. The change in Ghost was immediate. His ears flattened to his skull, and he bared his teeth at John in a silent growl. John stumbled back and held his hands up, calmingly. "Es all right." He soothed the sore wolf, "It's only me." A twig snapped to John's left, and his blade was halfway from his scabbard before he realized who it was. "Uncle," he greeted as he returned his blade to his sheath. "John," he replied as he took a seat on a nearby log. "Sam said you wanted to see me." "I do," John replied, "but Sam was meant to bring Roderick and the Great Yon too." "We're here," the Great Yon hoarsely whispered as he approached out of the darkness, Sam and Roderick Walton at his side. "What have you called us for?" "Craster has no sons," John stated. Uncle Benjen shifted uncomfortably on his log, while the Great Yon frowned. The Great Yon said. "What of it? Where are they all?" John asked, "For a man with so many daughters, why does he have no sons?" "The wildlings believe he eats them." Uncle Benjamin said as he stared back towards Craster's keep. John gave his uncle a flat stare and his uncle shrugged. That's not what his daughter-wife told me. Uncle Benjamin looked at him sharply. You spoke to one of his wives? He hissed. I. John replied, his voice hard. And she told me the truth of things, more truth than we would ever get from Craster. What has she been telling you? Uncle Benjamin asked, his voice laced with suspicion. He gives his sons to his gods. She worries for the child within her womb. She fears he will give it to his gods too if it's a boy. The great Jon frowned. Our gods are cruel, boy. If Craster thinks his sons are the price he must pay for the protection of our gods, then so be it. It is a sad fate for the babes, but I am no green man to judge on matters such as this. Not our gods. John replied. His gods. The cold gods. The ones in the night. The white shadows. The others. John's declaration was met with stunned silence before his uncle sneered. Are you hearing yourself, John? Others. He spat with derision. You've been listening to too many of old Nan's tales. John went to respond, but he was cut off by Roderick Walton. He stepped forward, menacingly. You knew. He stated as he glared at Uncle Benjamin. Uncle Benjamin looked shocked for a second, before his features twisted into a scowl. All men that spend any time beyond the wall learn of what Craster does. I learned it from Corin Halfhand, who learned it from a ranger, who learned it from a ranger, who learned it from Craster himself. No man agrees with it, but Craster is the friend the watch and I need in these lands. John stared at his uncle shocked. You knew? He asked, his voice gutted with disbelief. Uncle Benjamin looked at John sadly. John. He replied, but there is something you must understand. They are rumors and no more than that. Old Nan would tell you the others have been gone for 8,000 years, while my maester would say they never existed at all. And if the rumors are true? The great Jon snarled, his voice wrath. What then? Why didn't you bring this before your brother and the High Council? We could have devoted some men to discerning the truth of them. Uncle Benjamin snorted angrily. If I brought before my brother every rumor and fishwife's tale that ran throughout these lands, I would never leave Winterfell again for the rest of my life. You hear many strange things out here, and the return of the others. Uncle Benjamin scoffed, that's the most mundane of them all. I will discern the truth of them. John said as he turned back to Craster's keep. Rouse your men, Roderick. We take Craster captive tonight, before the sun has risen. Be careful to wake none of the Black Brothers or my uncle's men. I want no treachery now. John. Uncle Benjamin, aghast. We are under guest right. You cannot break guest right. Not me. John replied, and nor is Roderick Walton and any of his men, or Great Jon Umber and any of his men. Uncle Benjamin leapt to his feet. No, he barked, his voice made of steel. Your father may have granted command of this expedition, but he placed you under the command of me and these other men. You will not touch Craster, on this night or any of the nights to come. No, the great Jon rumbled, his voice dark with hurt and betrayal. We take Craster tonight. End him now, and even if they are just rumors, we have still saved 19 women from misery and who knows how many more to come. Uncle Benjamin narrowed his eyes at the great Jon. You would place such stock in rumors and myths such as those? Stock enough to break guest right? The great Jon's gaze turned distant. To the south, giants and mammoths and direwolves are but a myth. He stated, I myself have seen men that can bind monsters with their wits alone, men that have survived what would kill lesser men, and your own brother was both a wolf and a man. All of these are stranger and more obscene than cold gods that are worshipped by wildlings. What is there that makes you think that others cannot exist too? I've lived in these lands. Benjamin almost roared, if any others were living amongst us, then you would be sure that I would have seen or heard of them. Would have you? Roderick Walton asked, his voice neutral. You've just shown us that you're willing to turn a blind eye to such things. Uncle Benjamin stewed in silence, his eyes dark with wrath and anger, but John was done with the arguing. Action had to be taken, it was either now or never. For all that I don't agree with what my uncle has said tonight, he was right about one thing. I am under your authority, my lords. Jon turned to Roderick and pierced him with the fiercest gaze he could muster. The Great Jon and my uncle have made their will known. The decision rests with you, Lord Commander. Shall we take Craster tonight, or shall we continue to let him continue his abominable practices? The Lord Commander watched Jon with empty eyes, before turning to Uncle Benjen. I'm sorry, Benjen, he said coolly. But you don't know what signs my men and I have been seeing. I'm the closest thing there is to a green man without actually being one, and some of the things I have seen in the last few months, written in the stars, in the boughs of the weirwoods and in the realms of my dreams have left me scared. Craster may hold the answer to the questions that I have because of them. We take him tonight, and we end this now. Uncle Benjen scoffed in anger and shook his head. You're all fools, he hissed, his voice black. And where shall we rest when we come back this way? Where shall we find food and shelter when the wrath of the wild is battering at us? In 5 years, when a black brother bears news of the next king beyond the wall, where shall he find the respite he needs to survive? Roderick looked away, to the distant tips of the frost fangs, which could be just seen in the pre-dawn darkness. Better to rest in the wild, than rest in the halls of a man such as Craster. Uncle Benjen shook his head and unclipped his sword from his belt. He threw it at Jon's feet. Take it, boy, he spat. I want nothing to do with the rest of tonight, and neither do any of my men. Let it nor be said in these lands that the Heartstark did not warn against this course. With that he turned his back, and strode away. Go after him, Jon told the Great Jon. Make sure he doesn't do anything stupid. The Great Jon nodded and strode after him, while Jon turned to the Lord Commander of the Weirwood warriors. Rouse your men quickly. Arm them and armor them and gather them in silence before the gate. I want this hall free of Craster's name before the sun has risen. Roderick nodded and rushed off, while Jon and Sam strode up the hill towards Craster's keep, blade and axe in hand and ready to spill the blood of whoever stood in their way. Chapter 25, Tyrion 2, A Clash of Kings. Summary. Tyrion leaves the north and enters into a shit show. Please leave a comment and tell me what you think. This is the second longest chapter so far, behind only the second House of the Wolf. Notes. I'm back. Sorry for the wait, it's been far too long. I'm aiming to have the next chapter up sometime in between Monday and Wednesday. It's from Viserys POV. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. When Tyrion had left the north, suspicion had been writ onto the faces of every man he met along the way. From Last Hearth to Moat Cailin, men greeted him with wary eyes and grim lips. Few had laughed with him, and fewer had spoken with him. It was when he was halfway past Winterfell that he realized something. He was being kept in a bubble. His escort kept him away from places where he may have learned something, and kept him on the King's Road. Every inn he came to was deserted of small folk and only inhabited by the grim winter wolves. His own men were kept on a tight leash. Jyck and Dwyn told to stick with Tyrion in order to not be confused as bandits and killed. In the end, Tyrion managed to figure out what had happened after a chance meeting with a trader on the road just before Moat Cailin. Most of his stock was normal price, books and silks and cloths and the like. His steel and foodstuffs though had been priced through the roof, as higher rates as Tyrion had ever seen. Tyrion had read more books than he cared to count. He had read of the Conquest and the Dance and all the Blackfyre rebellions, from the first to the last. He had read of wars in Essos and Westeros and the lands beyond the Jade Gates. He knew the signs of war when they came, and high prices for steel and foodstuffs, the bread and butter of any war, was a sure sign a war was being waged somewhere close by. The fact that Tyrion's head was still attached to his shoulders, and Tommen's corpse was not swinging from the gates of Winterfell, told Tyrion that the Starks were yet to choose a side in the war. As he lay awake at night he often wondered what Cersei had done to spark it. Who else would have sparked it? Robert was many things, a warmonger amongst them, but his days of fighting real wars were long gone. Tyrion would be surprised if the whoremonger king was even still alive. Moat Cailin was where he was at now, locked up in a small room underneath one of the monstrosities that these Northmen called towers. His own men had been sequestered in their own rooms, and the guards at all their doors ensured they would not wander where they were not welcome. Tyrion knew not if it was day or not. The cell he was in was windowless, the only light being a candle that was burning concernedly low. Tyrion would have spent the time in the cramped cell reading, but all of his possessions had been seized by the young boy with the bull-headed helm. He was now the master of the moat from what Tyrion had understood. Where Brynden Tully had gone, Tyrion did not know, but it did not bode well either. The Blackfish was a master at war and fought and survived more battles than perhaps any other man in the realm, Sir Barristan Selmy being the exception. If he had left the service of the Starks to defend his homeland, then Tyrion would be walking right into the middle of a war zone. He knew not which way the Riverlords would fall when it came to war, but Tyrion knew that the Blackfish was no friend of Tyrion's and neither his father. His thoughts were interrupted by a pounding at his door, before it was thrown open by one of the guards. "Gather your things." The man barked, "You're to be escorted through the gates within the hour." Tyrion smiled and picked up the one candle in the entire room. "Mind if I keep this as a memento of my wonderful visit to the bastion of the first men?" The guard rolled his eyes at his companion before grasping him by the collar of his shirt and yanking him out of the room. "Come on." The other guard grumbled, "We don't have all day. Lord Durrandon wants to speak to you too before you leave." Tyrion frowned at the guard. Maybe he had heard wrong. "Lord who?" "Lord Durrandon." The guard barked back, before hitting him across the back of his head with the butt of his spear. "And stop asking so many questions. Keep your mouth shut and this will be easier for all of us." The two guards guffawed as Tyrion stumbled, but Tyrion ignored them both and instead turned his attentions to this Lord Durrandon. As far as Tyrion knew, the Durrandon line was dead, rendered extinct by the Targaryens during the conquest. All that was left of the legacy of the Storm Kings was the boy. Tyrion muttered to himself. He snorted in amusement. So the bastard had been made a lord, had he? He was sure Cersei would be glad to hear it. Perhaps Lord Stark wanted to sit a king of his own upon the Iron Throne. A nice little puppet that would be well in touch with his first men roots. Tyrion was marched through the castle and towards the main gates, where he found his men and all of his belongings awaiting for him along with Lord Durrandon. This was the first time Tyrion had seen the boy up close, and the resemblance to Robert was uncanny. The same powerful arms, the same strong jaw, the same coal-black hair and striking blue eyes and the same hammer, resting by his side. The biggest difference between Robert and the boy though was that Robert would never have been found with a book in his hands, while the boy was poring through one as Tyrion approached. "Lord Tyrion." The boy greeted as Tyrion arrived, before snapping the book shut. "Would you mind telling me where you got this?" He held the book up and Tyrion smiled sheepishly. It was the bloody blessed bastard. Almost impossible to find outside the north, it recounted the life and times of Brandon Snow, one of the more fascinating men to have ever lived in Tyrion's opinion. Tyrion also knew that the Northerners were highly protective of their bastard, and protected writings on him at all costs. He had thought he had hidden it well, but clearly not well enough. "I found it," Tyrion replied. "I stopped in at a small inn a few days' ride south of the wall, and someone had left it lying in the room I had rented." "And you just decided that since it was there unclaimed, it was your right to claim it?" Tyrion shrugged. "I didn't see anyone telling me no." The boy grunted back, before passing the book to one of the guards. "See that taken to the library." "I assume I don't get to keep my book then?" Tyrion asked. "You assume correct," the boy replied. "Now come. Mount up. I'll escort you as far south as the end of the Crannogs, but by then you will be on your own." Tyrion nodded, before rushing over to check if the rest of his belongings were still there. He had collected more than one oddity on this trip that he wanted to check were still there. "Fear not," he heard the boy say. "You can keep the rest of the stuff you took. None of it is that valuable or important anyway." Tyrion grunted in acknowledgement, but checked them all the same. The Shard of Mammoth's Horn was still there, as was the few other books he had collected and the obsidian blade he had picked up from a trader in Winterfell. Such blades were all the rage in the north, and used for ceremonial purposes, he was told. Tyrion had even been told that such a blade had been the one to end Rhaegar Targaryen's life as well, thrust into his heart by the Burnt Lord. The Burnt Lord was a man that Tyrion had almost desperately wanted to meet, but yet alas, the man was nowhere to be seen. He hadn't been seen in 4 years by northern standards and 9 by southern standards. Where he was now, no one seemed to know, not even Lord Stark. Tyrion had discreetly inquired after him when he had been in Winterfell, but most of his questions were either met with cold stares or fearful glances. The Burnt Lord was just as much of a mystery to the realm as he was when he had first sallied south with his armies all those years ago. "Are you coming, Lord Tyrion?" the boy called from atop his own horse, "or would you prefer that we returned you to your cell?" With a start, Tyrion realized that everyone was waiting on him, and he hopped astride his little pony as fast as he could. With a kick to its flanks, he was trotting after the boy and his guards, while Tyrion's own men trailed behind them. Their trip through the neck was dismally boring. Many times Tyrion tried to goad the boy into conversing with him, but he shrugged him off with grunts, shrugs and one-word answers. At night, Tyrion couldn't bear to be outside his tent as the swamps spooked him. Often he thought he was seeing movement in every shadow, and from what chatter he did manage to overhear, he understood the Crannog men were watching them. For 3 days they made their way down the narrow causeway of the neck, and in the middle of the morning on the 4th, they finally made it out of the neck and into the rolling pastures and low hills of the Riverlands. "It is here that I leave you, my lord," the boy told him, his horned bull's helmet making his voice echo strangely. "Ah," Tyrion said, strangely saddened. The boy's stubbornness had worn off on Tyrion, and he found himself enjoying his company on the road. He reminded him of what he had hoped Robert to be before he had known the man. "I'm sorry to hear it. You won't provide an escort for me to King's Landing?" "No," the boy replied. "My orders were to see you to the end of the neck and then to return to Moat Cailin. You're on your own from here on out." "Farewell then," Tyrion said as his horse picked its way forward, Jyck and Dwyn already a few meters ahead. The boy raised a hand in farewell, before turning around and marshalling his troops into 2 marching columns. Within minutes they were gone, back into the black bogs from which they had come. When they were well and truly gone and Tyrion had put a good hour of hard riding in between him and the neck, he turned to his men. "We are going to ride straight for the twins." "The twins, lord?" Jyck asked dubiously, "Whatever for?" "I have a wish to live, Jyck," Tyrion replied. "I'm almost certain that somewhere between here and King's Landing is a hostile army that Lord Stark wants me to bump into on the way." "An army?" Dwyn asked. "What would an army be around for?" "For there to be an army there needs to be a war." "Exactly," Tyrion replied. "And there is a war nearby, of that I am certain." "What makes you say that?" Jyck asked. "The merchant," Dwyn replied, his eyes alighting with understanding. Dwyn was an older man and had been in service to his family for a long time. His hair was not yet grey, but he was definitely old enough to have seen and remembered Robert's rebellion. "His prices. They were too high." "Aye," Tyrion replied, "that was one of the things that determined such a war was occurring, but I have been wary of such a thing as this since leaving the wall. It was written onto the face of every man I came across. I saw it in the weariness in their eyes. I saw it in the droop of their faces, and the way that every second man carried a sword or spear." "The twins though?" Jack asked. "Why the twins?" "They'd be just as likely to sell us to the highest bidder." "Aye they would," Tyrion replied, "and it's a good thing that no man bids higher than a Lannister." At this Dwyn laughed. "That's true enough." The next few days were tense, and every noise and shadow had his men jumping to their feet and reaching for their swords, but no one came for them and they encountered no one on their way to the twins. The villages were deserted or locked, and the holdfasts opened their gates to none. It was late in the afternoon when Tyrion spied the twins, where the lords of the crossing had their seat. The bridge was a massive arch of smooth grey rock, wide enough for 2 wagons to ride abreast. One glance was sufficient to tell that the realm was indeed at war. The battlements bristled with spears and scorpions, there was an archer at every crenel and arrow slit, the drawbridge was up, the portcullis down, the gates closed and barred. Jyck began to curse as soon as he saw it. "There's no way they are going to let us through there," he said. "They've got that place locked up tighter than a virgin's cunt." "Be patient," Tyrion advised. "Dwyn, raise my banner." Dwyn did so, and soon enough a sally port opened, a plank bridge slid across the moat, and a dozen knights rode forth to confront them, led by Lord Walder Frey's many sons. Sir Stephen Free, Lord Walder's heir, spoke for them. He looked much like a weasel, as did all his brothers. So too did Tyrion's cousins, the ones that were his through his Aunt Jenna. It seemed that Lord Free had strong seed, though not necessarily good seed. Sir Stephen. Tyrion cried at once, "It is so good to see my father's good family again. It has been far too long." Lord Tyrion. Sir Stephen replied gravely, though Tyrion thought he saw a hint of amusement in the knight's pale grey eyes. "My father would be most honored if you would share meat and mead with him in the castle and explain your purpose here." "Of course," Tyrion replied, with a wide grin. "I would be honored to share a meal with your father." He had gotten his foot in the door. The coming hours would tell if this was a wise course or not, or perhaps a course that had not needed to be taken at all. They rode forward, across the Sally Bridge and into the Twins. Tyrion had once heard it said that Lord Walder was the only lord in the Seven Kingdoms who could field an army from his breeches. When Lord Walder greeted Tyrion in the great hall of the East Castle, Tyrion understood what they meant. He was surrounded by 20 of his sons and more daughters, grandchildren, bastards and grand-bastards than Tyrion cared to count. "Lord Walder," Tyrion called in greeting, "it is a pleasure to finally meet you after so many years. My father and aunt have told me so many stories about you." "Have they now?" Lord Walder asked, his eyes squinting at Tyrion suspiciously. "Of course." Tyrion laughed, "Stories of your cunning and your wealth, your large family and larger armies." Lord Walder sneered at him. "Quit your bleating, boy," he growled, "you're nowhere near as convincing as you think, imp. Tell me what you want and this'll be over faster than you can say." "I want passage, of course," Tyrion replied. "Passage over your bridge, and perhaps some men-at-arms to escort me back to Casterly Rock and my father." Lord Walder began to laugh. It was an ugly sound, somewhere between a grunt and a cackle. "And would you like me to open my coffers while you're here? Perhaps you'd like me to present all my daughters and granddaughters to you, naked as their name days and bent over for you." "Why would I want such things?" Tyrion replied, "I haven't asked for much, Lord Walder, just passage." "Just passage?" Lord Walder cried. "Just passage? In times like these, giving you just passage could see me losing my head." "Losing your head?" Tyrion scoffed, "I assure you, Lord Walder, should anyone threaten you for helping me, my father will see you both protected against your foes and rewarded for assisting me." At this the whole crowd of Frizz tittered. "Have you not heard, Lord Tyrion?" "Heard what?" Tyrion asked, fighting to keep calm. "Your father's claws have been plucked from the way the Valyman are telling it." "What do you mean?" Tyrion asked, horror creeping into his voice. "Lord Ronal Arryn captured your brother, Jaime, and then fell upon and defeated the vanguards your father had sent to get him back. They say he captured Sir Adam Marbrand's vanguard, fought off the mountains and then routed what men were left. They say he rides against your father even now, gathering more and more swords to his cause." Tyrion's mouth dropped open in surprise. "Lord Ronal Arryn?" he asked, "whatever happened to Lady Lysa and Lord Robin and Daenerys Arryn?" At this the whole hall burst into roars of laughter. "Where have you been, imp?" one Free cried as tears streamed from his eyes. "Both Daenerys and Lysa are dead, Lady Lysa by Lord Stark and Lord Daenerys by your own sister. As for the boy, no one knows where that bastard has gone." Tyrion frowned as he took in this news. "Well then," he said once the laughter had died down enough for him to be heard, "I guess it is time we negotiate then." "Negotiate?" Lord Walder asked, "Whatever for?" "The way I see it, it is simple. We clap you in chains and see you to Ronal Arryn. We hears he has a penchant for Lannister blood at the moment." To Tyrion's surprise though, no one moved to do such an act. It seemed the decision had not yet been made. "Why haven't you then?" Tyrion asked. At this question, Lord Walder's face puckered like a fish. "Arryns," he snorted with disdain, "proud and splendid, blathering on about their honor. Lords of the Eyrie, protectors of the Vale, and recently hands of the king, great jobs those two have done." He cackled. "One died, pushing the realm to the brink of war, and the other pushed it off the brink. They think they are so great, they can come and ask for my help if they want it so badly." He snorted angrily. Not even a rider. He exclaimed, not even a raven. Well, here I am. Tyrion stated. Asking for your help. And yet what is the point? Lord Walder asked, why would I help you when the fall of your house seems to be nigh? Tyrion laughed out aloud at that. Any man who discounts my father so cheaply must not value his life very much. Ronal Arryn is a boy, my father a veteran of 3 wars, and more battles than most men in this realm. When the time comes, my father will emerge victorious as he always has. Lord Walder nodded at Tyrion. That's a fair point. He groused, but I still ain't sending any of my troops to die for your father. I'd say your father has a lot of battles to lose before he has any hopes of winning this one. Perhaps. Tyrion replied with a lot more conviction than he felt, but he will win it regardless. I'll get you to the other side of the river. Lord Walder said. But if your father loses this war, you will never hear. Do you hear me? Tyrion replied. I hear you. There's many boats around this part, isn't there? JYCK here, knows how to handle one of them, don't you JYCK? At Tyrion's prodding, JYCK nodded. He exclaimed. I do. Lord Walder nodded. Good. Get out of here then. I have no more need for you in my hall. And with that, his meeting with Lord Walder was over. As quickly as the Freys had come they disappeared, and Tyrion found himself beside Sir Stephen once more, riding his horse over the Green Fork, until he was safe on the western bank of the river. Thank you, my Lord of Frey. Tyrion cried as he and his 2 companions, along with 2 sellswords Tyrion had managed to secure the services of, rode away from the dismal castle and on towards safety hopefully. 2 weeks passed by, and Tyrion had never seen a more beautiful sight than the one of his father's war camp outside the walls of Riverrun. Never had tents looked so enticing and smoke smelled so good. They were met by outriders led by Sir Flamant Brax more than a mile from the camp. The fact that Tyrion had managed to get so close without being approached before greatly concerned him. Tyrion was not as versed in the arts of war as his father, but if Tyrion could get this close without wanting to hide, how close could their enemies get? Lord Tyrion! Sir Flamant exclaimed when he saw him. We thought you to be in chains. Sorry to disappoint. Tyrion replied. I'm sure my father will have much to say on the matter. Will you take me to him? As you say, my lord. Sir Flamant replied, before turning his horse around and guiding them back towards the Lannister camp. He called to the sentries manning the fortifications, and 3 lines of pickets were removed to allow them access. Lord Tywin's camp was sequestered on the western bank of the Green Fork, and stretched over several leagues. The sellsword Bronn had estimated the camp to be 20,000 when he had first spied the encampment from afar, and Tyrion guessed that he could not be far off. The common men were camped out in the open, but the knights had thrown up tents and some of the high lords had erected pavilions as large as houses. Tyrion spied the red ox of the Prestus, Lord Crickehall's brindled boar, the burning tree of Marbrand, the badger of Lydon. Over the banks of the Riverrun loomed ominously. All its gates were barred shut, and defenders walked its walls. The fact that 2 of those walls were not under siege did not seem to occur to the castle's defenders, whom instead seemed to keep just as vigilant watch on the empty east as they did the lion-filled west. He found his father's pavilion erected in the center of the camp, larger and grander than any other pavilion Tyrion had seen. Outside, a pair of house guards in crimson cloaks and lion-crested helms stood guard under inn sign, on either side of the doorway. Tyrion recognized their captain. My father. In the common room in the middle, Lord. My men will want meat and mead. Tyrion told him. See that they get it. He entered the tent, stepped through a silken door, and there was Father. Tywin Lannister, Lord of Casterly Rock and Warden of the West, was in his middle 50s and yet hard as a man of 20. Even seated, he was tall, with long legs, broad shoulders and a flat stomach. His thin arms were corded with muscle. Sir Kevan sat beside him, and it was him who saw him first. Uncle. Tyrion greeted as his uncle's eyes rose in surprise. It's good to see you again. Tyrion. His uncle cried as he got to his feet. We thought you captured or, worse. Tyrion smiled at his father, who had not moved a muscle since Tyrion had entered the tent, save for his eyes which followed Tyrion's movements coldly. "Sorry to disappoint." He chuckled darkly, though a few times it came quite close. "Though not as close as it has come for Jaime, I." "Jest all you want," his father snarled, "but you will not jest of that." Tyrion shrugged. "It's either laugh or cry. Jaime would have wanted me to laugh. He shouldn't want you to do anything. He should be here now, leading hosts in my name. Instead I've got you. What am I to do with you in war?" Tyrion tried not to let his anger or shame show on his face, but from the way his uncle looked at him, Tyrion guessed he had failed. "How is your war going?" Tyrion noticed anger play across his father's features, while his uncle winced. When no response was forthcoming, Tyrion saw fit to provide his own. "That bad, is it?" Father nodded at Uncle Kevan, and Kevan unrolled the map at his side. "It's rapidly going from bad to worse. When your brother was captured, it took us time to assemble our armies. Your father sent 2 vanguards to break the Arryn host, one under Sir Adam Marbrand, the other under Sir Gregor Clegane. Both were defeated, Sir Adam was captured and Sir Gregor beaten off. Lord Tully refused to call his banners in aiding either side, so much of the Riverlords have taken to declaring for one side or the other themselves. Bracken and Blackwood have taken the opportunity to rekindle their old conflict, while the Blackfish has gathered an army of woodsmen to his cause and is harassing us everywhere we turn. He's been killing our outriders, looting our baggage trains and disrupting our supply lines. He is the reason that this is a half-assed siege. The only positive is that he is harassing the Arryns in equal measure. And how is our dear friend, Ronald, going?" "As well as can be for a boy so green he pisses grass," his uncle replied. "The Arryns are sweeping west and south, intent on crushing us and Joffrey and anyone else who gets in their way. And that's not even the worst of it." His father finally spoke. "Renly has declared himself a king, wedding the Tyrell wench and gaining the banners of the Reach. My scouts and spies suggest his host is as much as 80,000 strong." Tyrion whistled lowly. That was an impressive number, larger than even the host that Aegon the Conqueror had defeated on the Field of Fire. "What of Stannis though?" he queried. "Has he sat by and let his younger brother take his crown?" "Joffrey's crown?" Father snapped back, and Tyrion nodded in agreement. "And as for what he has done, well, he is the most dangerous of them all. Of all them, he is the true enemy, the one that I fear." "What has he done?" Tyrion asked, fear creeping into his own voice. Any man his father feared, was one to watch. "The Spider has sent me many ravens. He speaks of ships and swords gathering to the Isle, the strength of Blackwater Bay. He speaks of shipbuilding and the hiring of sellswords. He speaks of Stannis bringing a Shadowbinder from Ass High. Of those, I am not concerned. But the Spider says that the Onion Lord of the North has come to serve him. The North has declared for Stannis." "Not yet," Uncle Kevan replied. "Though what they plan to do is anyone's guess. The Onion Lord advised him to sign the services of Torrhen Snow. And he did," his father declared, ignoring him and his uncle. Tyrion's heart dropped in his chest. Of all the foes Tyrion feared to face, Stannis and Torrhen were at the very top of the list, behind only the Burnt Lord and perhaps his own father. He could still remember the day that Torrhen Snow had sailed into Lannisport upon his Black Leviathan, bringing treasures and rarities from beyond the Sunset Sea, the first man in history to do so. "That is the bitterest of blows," his father admitted. "I had hoped to win him to our side, and had already sent the envoys. He alone could have ended Stannis for us, and instead he may be the one to end us." "Is it that bad?" Tyrion asked. For his father to admit that they might not win this war, was like the sky falling on all of their heads. Something no man expected to see. "Worse," his uncle replied. "Cersei has run King's Landing into the ground. Daenerys and Aelys Arryn, dead. Mark Ryswell, dead. Sir Barristan Selmy, dismissed and now missing." "Dead, dismissed and missing?" Tyrion asked. "Aye," his father growled, his voice tense with anger. "Madness. Rank madness. Selmy lent honor to the name of any king whom commanded him, and Ryswell was a fine sword and a finer rider. Commoners and lords alike loved him, as did the Northman. His hand curled into a fist. And now his death haunts us. The crag has been sacked and taken in his name. 4 days ago 3,500 Northmen fell upon it, led by 3 boys. It's another grievous blow. His uncle confessed. They are led by Asher Forrester, Edric Darkstark and Rookon Riverstark. It was the Riverstark ships that got them there. So the North has entered the war then? Tyrion asked, dreading the answer. Will the neck soon erupt with banners of white and grey? Thank the gods not. His father replied. Lord Stark has advised me that he will be staying neutral in the conflict for now, but he has sent envoys to each and every declared king in this war. Our envoys await us in King's Landing supposedly. Who they are, I do not know. You will find out soon enough, I suppose. And what of the Greyjoys? Tyrion asked, have they picked a side yet, or crowned one of their own? His father looked at him strangely. I will deal with the Greyjoys. I hope to make friends of them. If they can keep Renly occupied until we have either dealt with the Arinboy or Stannis, we will have done well for ourselves. The Ironborn are our enemies though. They were the Starks too yesterday. Now their houses are as close as can be. Tomorrow they will be as close to us as well. With what I have offered them, they cannot refuse. Do we march for King's Landing then? Tyrion asked. You do. Father replied as he turned around. I do. Tyrion exclaimed, what am I meant to do in King's Landing? Rule. His father replied curtly. Tyrion hooted with laughter. My sweet sister may have a word or two to say about that. A sneer flickered across his father's features. Let her say what she likes. Her son needs to be taken in hand before he ruins us all. Half the small council is missing as well, they will need replacing. Who will? Baelish was killed by Lord Stark, Pycelle by Daenerys Arryn. Stannis and Renly were the other 2 members. All we have left to us is Lord Varys. No wonder Joffrey is making so many mistakes. He needs a firm hand to keep him in line. If Cersei cannot curb the boy, you must. And if anyone is playing us false. Tyrion knew. Spikes. He sighed. Heads. Walls. His father nodded approvingly. Try not to make us any more enemies while you are there. We have enough as it is. If you can, pay off the North and Dorne with seats on the council. Keep them out of the war, or even better bring them into the war on our side. Be careful though, we have no friends in either places. We have no friends anywhere it seems. Tyrion remarked. But I will do my best to make us some. Dash. You. Cersei cried as soon as she saw him, what are you doing here? Tyrion grinned crookedly. I'm here to deliver a letter from father. He plucked the sealed scroll from his sleeve and extended it to her, for her to read. She glared at him, before plucking the scroll from his fingers and breaking the seal. While she busied herself reading it, Tyrion found himself a bottle of wine and settled into a comfy couch. The ride from Riverrun had been long and hard, and Tyrion had feared he wouldn't make it. Falcons and fish were nowhere to be found though, and Tyrion's journey had been as uneventful as a journey could be when a war was being waged. Has father lost his senses? Or did you forge this letter? She read it once more, with mounting annoyance. Why would he inflict you on me? I wanted him to come himself. She crushed Lord Tywin's letter in her fingers. I am Joffrey's regent, and I sent him a royal command. And he ignored you. Tyrion pointed out. He has quite a large army, he can do that. Nor is he the first. Is he? Cersei's mouth tightened. He could see color rising. If I name this letter a forgery and tell them to throw you in a dungeon, no one will ignore that, I promise you. Tyrion smiled widely. Please. He begged, do it. Throw me in the cells. It's a sight I would love to see. Cersei looked at him strangely. Have you gone mad? No, Tyrion replied, but it seems you have. Throw me in a black cell. Do you think father would just stand by and let you throw me in a cell? He's already upset with you enough as it is. Cersei paled. He is. Tyrion snorted. Why wouldn't he be? From memory his exact words were Cersei has run King's Landing into the ground. What was I to make of that? Cersei scowled. It hasn't been my fault. The small council is all but non-existent. All I have to help me run this kingdom is the eunuch, and I grow sick of his voice. I want to tear his tongue out. Best you don't do that. He replied casually. That cockless wonder spins many stories that are crucial to the war effort. Cersei scoffed into her goblet. What would you know of war? Less than Jaime and more than you. Tyrion noted Cersei's gaze tremble at the mention of their brother's name. Cersei had always thought herself subtle, but Tyrion knew how to read her like a book. You want Jaime back? Tyrion stated softly. So do I. Cersei lifted her gaze to his. You want to see Joffrey remain on his throne? Tyrion continued. So do I. Tyrion took a sip of wine before continuing. You want to make father proud? He stated. So do I. Tyrion got to his feet and grasped his sister by the hand. You want to live? He whispered. So do I. Our goals are aligned, Cersei. I'm only here to help, nothing more. Tyrion put on a madman's grin. You can call me a monster, but I am your monster. You call me cunning and I am. I will do everything within my power to see House Lannister survive this war, and Joffrey and you as well. After a long moment of silence, finally Cersei deigned to respond. It may be worth the trying, but make no mistake, Tyrion. You shall be the king's hand in name, but my hand in truth. You will share all your plans and intentions with me before you act, and you will do nothing without my consent. Do you understand? Oh, yes. Do you agree? Certainly. He lied. I am yours, sister. For as long as I need to be. So now that we are of one purpose, we ought to have no more secrets between us. How did you kill Robert? He did that himself. All we did was help. When Lancel saw that Robert was going after Boar, he gave him strong wine. His favorite sour red, but fortified, 3 times as potent as he was used to. The great stinking fool loved it. He could have stopped swilling it down any time he cared to, but no, he drained one skin and told Lancel to fetch another. The Boar did the rest. You should have been at the feast, Tyrion. There has never been a boar so delicious. They cooked it with mushrooms and apples, and it tasted like triumph. Truly, sister, you were born to be a widow. Now if we are done, I will be off. Where are you going? Cersei asked. I haven't given you leave to depart. Father tasked me with bringing either the North or Dawn into the fold with us, and I hear that 2 Northmen are fresh in the city. And with that, Tyrion left. Outside Cersei's room, Tyrion nodded to Sir Mandon and made his way down the long vaulted hall. Bronn fell in beside him. Of Chigon there was no sign. Where's our friend? Bronn shrugged. Not sure. He got bored of waiting around. He felt an urge to explore. I hope he doesn't steal anything important. Tyrion sighed. Try to find him. And while you are at it, send someone to find these 2 Northmen that Lord Stark sent. Have them brought to me in the Tower of the Hand. Bronn nodded and strode away, while Tyrion continued on to his new quarters in the Tower of the Hand. He had barely gotten himself acquainted with his new chambers before he heard a knock on the door, and in strode Bronn with the 2 Northmen that Lord Stark had sent as envoys. I found them, Lord. Bronn stated, not far from here. Yes. Tyrion stated as he observed the 2 with unease. You found them. Domeric Bolton stepped forth and extended a hand. It is a pleasure to meet you, Lord Tyrion. He said in his soft voice. His pale eyes shimmered unnaturally, while his paler skin seemed to glow. I'm afraid we didn't get much of chance to talk while you were at Winterfell. No, Tyrion said as he shook the hand and turned his gaze to the other. We didn't. Lord Tyrion. Ramsay Snow said as he smirked at him. He was clearly lowborn, his voice being much different to his brother's, and there was something frightening about the way he smiled and the way his eyes shifted. Tyrion hadn't met these 2 before at Winterfell, but he had heard much about Lord Bolton's boys. Dangerous, deadly and powerful, the 2 half-brothers were as feared as any other in the north. Their relationship was as queer as it was strong, and Tyrion knew few who did not shiver at the name Bolton and shudder at the name Ramsay. My lords, Tyrion greeted, we have much to discuss, please, take a seat. Bronn, tell someone to fetch some wine and food. Bronn rushed away and Domeric and Ramsay lowered themselves into the chairs Tyrion had drawn up for them. Tell me, Tyrone stated while they waited on wine, what is your liege lord's stance on the war within the south, here? Domeric and Ramsay glanced at each other and a full conversation seemed to be had in the span of a few moments, before both turned to him and Domeric spoke. He is against it, Lord Tyrion. War is a horrible thing, as he well knows. He wants nothing to do with it. He wants no northern men or women to die in the south anymore. So why then have 3,500 Northmen fallen upon the crag and sacked it, and even as we speak raiding and raping their way through the Westerlands? Domeric frowned. They have nothing to do with us. They have acted outside the authority of Lord Stark and he has forsworn them all as oathbreakers and traitors. If any of them survive the war, they will not be welcomed home. Why then? Tyrion asked, do you know why they attacked? Of course I do. Domeric replied. Your brother killed Mark Ryswell, did he not? He didn't. Tyrion lied. The grievous act was done by one of Lord Arryn's guardsmen. Jaime saw it with his own eye. A dagger slammed into the table. For every lie you tell me, I will tear one of your fingernails out. Ramsay stated casually as he watched Tyrion over the pommel of the knife. Mark Ryswell was the uncle of both Rickon Riverstark and Edric Darkstark. Domeric continued flatly, and Asher Forrester loved him as an uncle of his own. Mark Ryswell was loved throughout all the north. When they put forth the call to avenge him, many came. Tyrion continued to stare at Ramsay in horror, who only stared back at him. Please excuse my brother, Lord Tyrion. Domeric said when Tyrion continued to stare only at Ramsay, I apologize if his outburst surprised you, but he doesn't like liars. Tyrion turned back to Domeric, but kept an eye on Ramsay. No need to apologize. He replied, but from what I've heard your brother doesn't like all sorts of men. Domeric smiled sadly. Ramsay can be temperamental at the best of times, but I assure you, all he does to please our father. Tyrion smiled tightly. That I can understand. He raised his glass of wine in a toast. To fathers, he said, overbearing and otherwise. To fathers. Domeric echoed as he lifted his own glass of wine. Ramsay Snow took no part in the toast, but he yanked his dagger from the table and returned it to his belt. Tyrion poured both men another cup of wine, before settling back into his seat. So tell me, he said, what does Lord Stark want to see? Domeric shrugged. An end to the violence. He suggested, the disbanding of armies. The quicker House Lannister prevails in this war, the quicker such things can happen. Tyrion suggested back. Would they? Ramsay asked, as he finally entered the conversation. I've met the boy you would crown king over all of us. Those that lay claim to his crown are a lot more impressive than him. I'm yet to hear of Stannis beating young girls in his throne room. Tyrion stared into the contents of his cup. From what I hear, Tyrion replied, he is not the only one in this city with a penchant for young girls. Ramsay burst into laughter, while Domeric's lip curled downwards. I don't mind that he's naughty, Lord Tyrion. He chuckled darkly, I just loathe that he's sloppy. Regardless, Domeric interrupted, he is a boy playing at being king. 3 kings have claimed your nephew's throne, what makes your nephew better than all of them? What does Joffrey have? Tyrion exclaimed. He has the backing of House Lannister, the mightiest and richest of all the southern houses. He holds the Iron Throne and holds King's Landing too. He is the true heir of Robert Baratheon, named and recognized before the sights of gods and men. Is he though? Domeric asked softly, rumors have been swirling. Letters have been sent. Lords and now kings are claiming many things. Careful, Lord Domeric. Tyrion warned, what you speak of is treason. The same treason Mark Ryswell died for? Ramsay asked. Tyrion ignored the jibe and pushed on. I want peace more than anyone. He gestured to his small body. This frame is not built for war. I am built for libraries and whorehouses, pleasure boats and feasting halls. I want peace between Starks and Lannisters, and I want to see the treaty King Robert and Lord Stark signed. Domeric started at this, and shifted in his seat. "You want to uphold the treaty?" he asked. "I," Tyrion implored. "I will uphold the treaty. Take a seat on the small council, Lord Domeric. I will see you named as Master of Laws, and as long as I sit on the council, you two will have a seat beside me." "And what do you want in return?" Domeric asked. "The North remembers, they say." Tyrion stated, "Remember my kindness when another king comes for this throne. Remember that House Lannister held to the treaties that came before us." Domeric nodded slowly. "I will," he said as he got to his feet. "I don't think I will ever forget you, Tyrion of House Lannister." Notes. Please leave a comment and tell me what you think. This is the second longest chapter so far, behind only the second House of the Wolf. Let me know if you like it, or even if you don't. Good. All feedback is useful. Next chapter is from Viserys. Shit is about to hit the fan. Chapter 26, Viserys 3, Widow's Watch. Summary. Viserys returns to Westeros. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. In the distance, Widow's Watch burned. The gates of the Shivering Sea had well and truly been smashed open by Viserys and his armies, and it was a glorious sight to see. For so long, Viserys had been working towards such a time as this, a time when Westeros would tremble at his family's name once more. And here he was taking the first step. The Dovahkiin rocked gently as she surged towards the beach where less than an hour before the majority of his fleet had landed, spilling his army onto Westerosi soil. Widow's Watch had been caught unprepared, just as Viserys had planned. The gates had been shut, but not barred, and it only took 2 slams with their ram before they spilled open. Viserys had watched with delight as his vanguard of 6,000 had gotten into the castle, and then fought for it. Minutes later, his main force, another 10,000 men, arrived, and then the battle was all but won. Pockets of resistance still held on parts of the walls, and in the main keep, but they would not last much longer. "It is done, my king," Sir Willem D'Ary said from where he stood beside him. "War will be had now, for good or for worse." "Aye," Viserys replied. "War will be had. First for the usurper's cur and then for the usurper himself. I will see his corpse on the end of my blade before all this is done. It will be a glorious day," Sir Willem D'Ary affirmed. "The day when dragons retake what is rightfully theirs." The ship shuddered as it slid along the beach, before stopping. It was done. There was no going back now. Viserys drew his sword, and jumped from the side of the ship, onto the beach below. He dropped to his knees, and kissed the ground in front of him. The sand tasted of salt and rotting seaweed and grit, and yet Viserys had never tasted anything so sweet as this. This was his land, and he was glad to be back. When he had last set foot on Westerosi soil he had been a boy of 8 with a mother still and others as well. So many friends he had lost, so many friends he had made. But now he was back, and back with a vengeance. He got to his feet, and behind him the last remnants of his army spilled onto the beach as the rest of his ships beached themselves. A rearguard, 4,000 strong, and now his entire army was here. "Burn them all," Viserys told Sir Willem as the last of his troops disembarked from the ships. "We will not run now. It will be to victory or to death. Burn all the ships, and let the ashes scatter to the wind. We will not run now." Viserys wasn't sure why he repeated himself. All he knew was that never in his life had he been so scared or so excited. As Sir Willem D'Ary barked out commands to his personal guard, Viserys turned his attention to the burning castle before him. The stench of smoke and salt hung in the air, while the screams of the wounded and dying drifted by on the westerly wind. As Viserys attempted the ascent up to the castle, the smells and sounds only grew stronger, and the first signs of blood and bodies could be seen. The furthest ones from the castle were clearly his own, but as they drew closer to the walls, the bodies became intermingled with those of the defenders. Fire and blood. He had done what he had promised his mother all those years ago and brought fire and blood to those who had spurned them. "Your Grace," called Sir Jaime Riker, "Widow's Watch is ours. All the defenders are dead or captured." "At what cost?" asked Sir Willem, his voice grave. He knew war, he had seen it before. "How many of our own did we lose?" 16. Sir Jeremy replied with a wide grin. 3 of our own, 9 sellswords and 4 of the Volantens. What of the lord and lady of this place? Viserys asked. Where are they? Lord Flint Stark is dead, your grace. Riker replied, he chose to fight rather than surrender. It didn't get him far. They shot him with crossbows. He didn't even get to wet his blade. His wife died when we put the central keep to the flame. Did they have any children then? Do we have any hostages? 1. Riker replied. A boy named Cregan of 5 Namadays. His brothers and sisters were all killed with their mother. We are holding him in one of the towers we didn't burn. Viserys nodded slowly, considering his options. Kill him. Pardon? Sir Jeremy asked, confusion and horror written onto the lines of his face. Kill the boy. Viserys replied. We have no need for him. He's a boy of 5. Sir Jeremy exclaimed. You can't mean to kill a boy of 5. Of course I do. Viserys replied coolly. Do you think the burnt lord would have had mercy for me had he captured me and my mother on Dragonstone? Of course not. When all is said and done, House Stark will be but a distant memory for Westeros. The boy is of House Flint Stark, is he not? He is. Sir Jeremy grudgingly replied. Then kill him. Viserys stated. Or tell me to get someone else to do it. I'm sure Corin Vardis would prove amenable. Sir Jeremy nodded stiffly before striding away. Viserys turned from him and to Sir Ilyas Willam, the commander of his Outriders and Scouts. Send out your Outriders now to the west and north. I have no doubt that someone has seen the smoke and is coming to lift the siege of this place. I want to know who is and where they are coming from. Sir Ilyas nodded, before mounting his horse and spurring it away and out the ruined gates of Widow's Watch. Runners were sent and the captains and commanders of his army were gathered in one of the still-standing towers. They came when he called. Donari O'Herity, Jaemen Xerox and Corin Vardis splattered in blood and gore and sporting cuts and bruises. Carvo Nogaris had fared the best of all his Essozi captains, and you would not have known he had just fought a battle were it not for the long scratch that graced his shining silver breastplate. Lord Orton, Sir Willem and Sir Jeremy hadn't been in the vanguard and thus hadn't seen much of the fighting, though Sir Jeremy's hands were stained with blood regardless. Viserys gave him an approving nod as he came in, but Sir Jeremy refused to nod back. His face was pale, and his eyes seemed to be in some distant place. Good Sirs, Viserys greeted them once they were all gathered. It is done. Your Grace. They responded in unison. It is done. We have landed. Viserys warned them all. For all of now, it is either to victory or death. The North remembers, they say. If we lose our war, they will never forget what we did here, or what we are about to do. They will have no mercy for you. You are bound to me now, even more than you were before. We have always been bound to you, your Grace. Lord Orton told him. From your first day, to your last. It was not Lord Orton that Viserys was concerned about though. His loyalty was assured to him, as was the loyalty of all the Westerosi exiles. They would know no peace while Robert sat the throne, only Viserys could see them delivered back to their homelands and titles. The sellswords had nothing inhibiting them from betraying him though, nothing but for their oaths, which was only as good as the depth of his coffers. He watched all of them warily, Donari O'Herity and Jaemen Xerox with their faces of stone and Corin Vardis too. Of all of them, he feared Vardis and his charming grins and easy laughs. Vardis' loyalties were fickle, and his skill with a blade was as good as any that Viserys had seen. If any of these men were to betray him, it would be Vardis, for sure. You are right, your Grace. Vardis spoke as poured himself a fine vintage of wine he had looted from the cellars. Our cause is bound to yours. These Northmen are vengeful, angry men. I know. I have worked and lived amongst them. There will be no mercy for any of us, if you are to lose. He drew his sword, and placed it at Viserys' feet. Here is my sword. It is yours from this day, to your last. My men will march beside you in battle, while our counsel shall be yours in peace. Rise, Sir Corin. Viserys replied, we have a water plan. By now, Lucerys Valerian's ships will be sailing into the Bight, engaging the fleets of the Starks. Soon, Volantis armies will muster and march on King's Landing. All of Westeros will tremble before us, but only if we can move before they have the time to gather back to strike at us. Our goal is Moat Cailin, Sir Jaime Riker said as he stepped forth. Without it, our cause is doomed to failure. If anyone but us holds it, Westeros is not split in two, and we and our allies will be crushed by the might of a united Westeros. That cannot happen. Sir Willem Dare put in. Westeros armies are vast and well equipped. We will have a hard enough time of subduing the north, let alone all the 7 kingdoms. We will though. Viserys stated. Mine is the blood of Aegon the Conqueror, Maegor the Cruel and Jaehaerys the Conciliator. On my shoulders rest the legacy of a 300-year dynasty. We will not falter now, not after all the highs and lows my house has been through. These kingdoms were destined to be mine, my mother promised them to me on my deathbed. I will take them, with fire and blood. Now tell me, my lords and sirs, where goes our war from here? We must burn it all. Corin Vardis warned as he swept his hand over the map in front of them. From here, to the King's Road, we must take what supplies we can and burn what is left behind. If we leave anything behind, you can be assured the Northmen will use it to fuel the armies they'll use to crush us. I say we ride straight for Moat Cailin, bypass White Harbor entirely, and take them in the rear while their pants are still down. A good plan. Jaehaerys and Xerox agreed. Speed is of the essence now. We cannot afford to linger long in any place. White Harbor won't just sit on our hands and watch us pass though. They'll ride out to meet us. Donari O'Herity stated. Good. Carvo Nogarrios stated, speaking for the first time in a long time. When Carvo spoke, Viserys listened. He was learned in the ways of war. We have 20,000 men. White Harbor will not be able to field more than 5. If they march out to greet us, we will crush them with 4 times their number and then White Harbor shall be ours too. If they take the wise course, and sit behind their walls, we march straight past and take Moat Cailin. Either way, we win. A great victory shall be ours. By this time in a moon's turn, either their greatest fortress or their greatest city will have fallen to us. At this Viserys stirred. Why not do both? He asked. Both? Sir Willem asked, confused. What for? We'll split the army up. Viserys stated as he leant forward over the table, 4,000 men under the command of Carvo Nogarrios will march on White Harbor, while another 4,000 will march north for the Hornwood under the command of Sir Jaime. The Hornwood. Corin spat, what do we want with the Hornwood? Nothing. Viserys snarled, but I want to draw the strength of White Harbor out from behind their walls. Carvo will join battle with them, and then stage a retreat, falling back north. Sir Jaime will turn his host around, rejoin Carvo and crush the strength of White Harbor, while Sir Willem commands another 4,000 against the city. The remaining 8,000 will do as we originally planned, duping the garrison of Moat Cailin into marching north, before doubling back and taking the fortress. We take White Harbor and make sure we get hostages. From what I know, Lord Mandaeli has 2 granddaughters. Their capture alive shall be key. With them in our grasp we can knock one of the most powerful houses of Westeros out of the war against us. Viserys' new plan was met with silence. That's a risky plan. Corin Vardis eventually stated. The chances of failure are high. So too was our chances of surviving the march from Volantis to the Shivering Sea. We did it though. And we survived. Viserys stared each of his men in the eye. We aren't going to win this war by playing safe. We have to take risks if we want to win. This is a big risk, but if it pays off, all of Westeros will tremble to hear our names. We do this plan, or we do no plan. We do this plan, or we die. One by one, his men nodded their assent. Some firmly, some with hesitation. Viserys nodded back at them. Speed is key if we are to win. Tell your men to get a good night's rest. We leave at first light in the morning. The captains nodded and rushed off to do as he bid. Sir Willem Dare stated behind, as did Sir Jaime. Are you sure of this plan, Your Grace? Sir Willem asked, it is not often wise to change the plans of battle the moon before a battle. Of course I'm not sure. Viserys replied. But what other choice do we have? I will not have any brand me a coward. I will not lose this war, I cannot afford to. For you perhaps there may be mercy. For me there will be none. I will only find a quick death if Lord Stark is feeling merciful, and a long one if he is not. You are preparing to lose, Sir Jaime stated, and Viserys snarled at the knight. I am preparing to win. The door opened, and Sir Ilyas Willam stepped into the room. His blade was drenched in blood, but his face was flushed with victory. Our outriders caught wind of 3 different hosts gathering in 3 different places. We fell upon all of them, one by one, and crushed them all. 3 hosts of 500 men each, all gone. Viserys nodded. You have done well, Sir Ilyas. I will remember your service. Now leave me, all of you. I would have some alone time with Sir Willem. The other 2 knights left, and Sir Willem sat down in the chair next to Viserys. Tell me the truth, Sir Willem, what do you think of my new plan? Sir Willem looked thoughtful for a moment, before turning to the boy he had known from birth. Like all of your grand plans, Viserys, if it works, it will prove you to be one of the greatest military minds in history. If it doesn't work, well then we all die. Viserys hummed and closed his eyes. I do have one question though. Sir Willem queried, you spoke much of which troops would be going where and who would be leading them, but throughout your entire plan, I never heard where you would be. Viserys' eyes snapped open and he stared at the point on the map where he would be going. I will be going to pay back some debts. He snarled as he stabbed the map with point of his finger. Under the red dot that represented the city, the name of the place was written in glossy black ink. Winterfell. Notes. Please leave me a comment telling me what you think of this Viserys, as I am uncertain on how long or how great a threat to make him. I know what I want him to accomplish, but I'm not sure just how well he should accomplish his goals, so please throw me a bone and help me out. Chapter 27, Robb 2, The Summer Kingdom. Summary. Robb arrives in the Reach. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Around Robb, steel crashed on wood and the grunts and screams of fighting and wounded men. He was in the middle of the crush of men, his sword in his hand and his shield strapped to his arm. At his back, Willis Mandaeally grunted and hacked at the opponent he was facing. Through the slit of Robb's visor, he noted a new challenger approaching. If this knight had shown up in the training yard in the north, he would have been laughed right out of it. His armor was silver, and decorated with sapphires and twining black vines, while on his back rested a cloak of forget-me-nots sewn to a heavy woolen cloak. Golden roses decorated the crest of his helm, yet there was nothing amusing about the length of deadly steel that shimmered and shined in his hands. Robb, in contrast, must have looked like a pauper to those watching. He was only dressed in worn plate armor, with a coat of black mail and a simple helm of good steel. His sword did not shimmer and shine, and yet it was no less dangerous or deadly than the blade of his opponent. Fight me, Robb Snow. The knight before him cried as he raised his sword and shield. Robb grinned savagely behind his helm. If this one wished to make this fight personal, then so be it. The blood began to pound through Robb's ears and his heart beat faster and faster in his chest. He raised his own sword and leapt into a run to meet the knight before him. His feet pounded along the soft turf, while the wind whistled through the slits in his visor. With a crash, he fell upon his opponent, his blade flashing downwards in a dangerous arc towards the knight's head. The knight managed to raise his blade to block it, but he had not the strength to hold the force of the blow, and instead thrust the blow aside. Robb's blade fell to the side, while the Knight of Flowers thrust back at Robb. Robb caught the blade in his gauntlet before slamming his shield into the other knight's breastplate. The other knight stumbled back, driven away by the strength of Robb's blow, and Robb noted with a hint of satisfaction that the other knight was winded. Robb padded forward slowly, circling to the knight's left. Around him, the tumult of the melee was dying down, and he noted the numbers of men on the sidelines growing. Behind him, he heard movement, a squishing of mud between boots, and instinctively ducked. The blade sailed over where his head had been moments before, and he rammed upwards into shoulder of the knight that had attacked him from behind. The knight was tall and wrapped in enameled blue plate armor. The armor was worn, covered in chips and dents and gouges. Clearly this one had been where the fighting had been fiercest. The knight's cloak was little more than rags, but the edge of the blade he held was still as sharp as ever. Behind him, he heard the other knight getting back his bearings. Rob had to end this quick. He doubted the two of them would be kind enough to finish each other off, before the survivor turned for him. Doubtless it would be the other way around. The Blue Knight took a step to Rob's right, putting Rob more directly in between the two other survivors. Rob turned his head to check where the Knight of Flowers was, and that was when the Blue Knight struck. He barreled into him from behind, driving him to the floor. They tumbled around on the floor, exchanging punches, kicks and gouging at each other's armor, trying to find a weak spot. Rob managed to get one foot under the Blue Knight's stomach and he kicked out with all his might. The Blue Knight sprawled backwards, into the mud, while Rob scrambled to find his sword. He found the hilt of one, in the mud, but it wasn't his own. He picked it up all the same, and spun just in time to catch the blade of the Knight of the Flowers who had chosen this moment to re-enter the fray. With a growl of anger, Rob lashed out with the blade. He swung powerful, sweeping arcs that drove the Knight of the Flowers back across the yard. The knight tripped on something and fell backwards and Rob didn't hesitate to end it there. His sword flashed down, but he was stopped when a blade crashed into the side of his helm. He stumbled to the side, his head ringing. Grunting and shaking his head to clear it, Rob found himself beginning to get frustrated. He felt something bubbling within his chest, and he ripped off his helm and pitched it at the Blue Knight, before tackling the Knight of Flowers to the ground. He wrenched off the helm of the knight beneath him and began pounding his fists into the other knight's face. "Loras!" came a cry from the gallery, "Loras!" The voice was soft, and effeminate. The voice seemed to stir something within the knight beneath him and Loras Tyrell flashed out with his own fist and caught Rob on the jaw. Rob punched Loras one final time, harder than he ever had before, and this time the Knight of the Flowers didn't punch back. Rob grunted and rolled off him, before getting back to his feet. The Blue Knight was watching him warily, pacing on the edges of his vision, his sword still clutched in his hands. Rob smiled, blood dribbling from where he had bitten his tongue when Loras Tyrell had punched him back. "Well done," he told the Blue Knight, "you've outlasted them all, but you won't outlast me." The Blue Knight didn't deign to respond, only continued to pace on the edges of his vision. Rob shrugged and retreated from the Blue Knight. The Blue Knight followed up, determined to push the advantage, but Rob had found what he was looking for. Crouching into the yard, he picked up a discarded long-handled hammer. He wasn't used to this weapon, but he had seen Gendry wield one enough that he felt he knew the basics. Hammers weren't like swords after all, you needed no skill, just an ungodly strength. Rob reached deep inside of himself and drew on all his rage and anger, and the reserves of energy he felt that were depleted. With a roar he launched himself back at the Blue Knight, determined to end the fight in one powerful swing. The head of the hammer came around upon the knight's left side, and he tried to dodge it. The hammer struck true though and the Blue Knight tumbled to the floor, dazed and clutching his arm. He groaned and rolled onto his back. "I yield," Rob heard, and he nodded in satisfaction before dropping the hammer and turning to the king and queen who watched it all. King Renly Baratheon looked absolutely delighted, a wide smile playing across his features while he clapped in congratulations. Next to him, his queen looked greatly displeased. She very pretty, with a doe's soft eyes and a mane of curling brown hair that fell about her shoulders in last ringlets. Her smile was shy and sweet, though her dainty lips and delicate brow were curled into a frown at this moment. Rob bared his bloody grin at the pair of them, before spitting a wad of blood and saliva out of his mouth and onto the ground next to him. He fell to one knee before them both. "You were all Lord Tarly promised you to be and more," Renly cried at Rob. Lord Randall Tarly nodded at that, his mouth set in a grim line, and Rob nodded at the Lord of Hornhill in appreciation. Rare is the man who can fend of Sir Loras, and rarer the man that can fend of both Sir Loras and Brian of Tarth. At the last knight's name, the crowd erupted in jeers and cheers. "A beauty! A beauty!" they cried and Rob frowned. "Pardon, your grace?" he asked as he turned to the Blue Knight who was limping away, "Did you say, Brian?" The Blue Knight turned at the mention of his name. The poor man looked defeated, cradling his injured arm and stooped over in shame and defeat. "Good sir," Rob cried as he approached the Blue Knight. "Remove your helm so I may see the face of the man who fought so well. It has been a long time since I have been challenged in the way you challenged me." The knight shook his head, and went to turn away, but Rob caught the knight by his good arm and pulled him back towards the king. "Come!" Rob cried, loud enough for all to hear. "The king must meet such a fine fighter as yourself. Remove your helm, good sir, so all here may know your name." The knight reached up and pulled his helm from his head, except it wasn't a he beneath the helm, but rather a she. "My lady?" Rob asked with a confused glance at the king. The lady only knelt before her king in response, her head bowed in deference. When Rob saw her face he understood why men called her a beauty. It wasn't said with love, it was spoken with mocking. She had shoulder-length hair, blonde and brittle, while her features were broad and coarse and covered in freckles. Her teeth were prominent and crooked, and Rob pitied her more than any other in this camp of corpses. "You are a fine fighter, Lady Brian," Rob told her. "Few I have faced have given me the challenge you have. You remind me a bit of a good friend of mine, Lady Daisy Mormont. Like you, she fights alongside men, and does it well too." Brian nodded her head slightly, though she still looked sad. "Not as well as you do though, Lord Rob," Renly cried from his throne, the last of 119 mounted riders. "Name any boon of me, and if it is within my power I shall grant it to you." Rob turned back to the king, as the poor girl went to slink away. "With all due respect, your grace, I have been ordered to not partake in any activities that may tie me to the cause of one king, and thus I cannot accept such a boon. In my place, I beg you grant the boon to the Lady Brian of Tarth. She fights as well as any other I have faced, and you would find few who could have defeated her on this field here today." Renly laughed as Brian turned around in shock. "Well said, Lord Rob, well said. You are a shining light of chivalry, and all men could take lessons from you. You are right, I believe. If you forfeit your prize as victor, then it falls to Brian of Tarth to claim the prize as the winner of second place. Only because she hung in the back while the true men fought." Someone cried behind him, and Rob whirled round. "Who said that?" No one responded. "Who said it?" Rob roared. "Come down here, and face her yourself, you craven dog. I fought against both Sir Loras and Lady Brian. She may not be the better swordsman, but she is the better warrior." Whomever had called it, refused to respond, and Rob turned back to Brian and the king. "The boon is hers, your grace." Renly nodded before turning to Brian himself. "As the champion of the great melee at Bitterbridge, you may ask me of any boon that you desire. If it lies in my power, it is yours." "Your grace," Brian answered, "I ask the honor of a place among your Rainbow Guard. I would be one of your 7, and pledge my life to yours, to go where you go, ride at your side, and keep you safe from all hurt and harm." "Done," he said. "Rise, rise as Brian the Blue, a knight of my 7. When Renly cut away her torn cloak and fastened a rainbow in its place, Brian of Tarth looked as though the world had been served to her on a platter. Her smile was proud, and her voice was strong as she said, "My life for yours, your grace. From this day on, I am your shield, I swear it by the old gods and the new." Around them, the press of observers and men melted away, while Rob sought out Willis Marndaly and his own men. His father had given him 200 winter wolves to serve as an escort while he was in the south. They were captained by Willis Marndaly, who had proven himself a fine fighter, and a finer eater. Renly had placed him and his men in a place of privilege close to Renly's own pavilion. As his father had told him, Renly was doing much to curry favor with Rob, and in turn no doubt he hoped to curry favor with his father. "Lord Rob!" Willis Marndaly cried, and he emerged from the press of men, his wide frame and broad belly serving as a ram to push him through. "Come, come, the men caught a stag for us. We shall eat well tonight." Rob smiled at the captain of his men, before following him across the camp. Around him the men of the Reach congratulated him on his win and patted his back. Some japed with him, some laughed with him, but all of them scraped before him. They feared him, he knew it. It was Lord Tarlis' fault, well, Lord Tarlis and his father's. Lord Tarly had told not a soul of what had happened at the Battle of God's Eye, and neither had his father. When facts lacked, men spread falsehoods, and what great falsehoods had been spread. Rob had heard 100 different tellings of the tale, from an overwhelming crush of Northmen to an army of wargs and skin changers to an army of children of the forest and giants. Stories abounded freely, and those stories made men fear to make an enemy of him. They arrived within the confines of their own tents and found that, true to Willis's word, a stag was being turned over a spit, fine slices of venison already collected on a plate that had been set next to the cook fire. Willis Marndale chortled with delight when he saw them and hurried to take a seat by the fire. A squire brought him a flagon of wine, while another brought him the choice serving of the stag. Rob turned away and returned to his tent, pulling off his dented and bloody armor and removing his chainmail and leathers. His tattered cloak fell to the floor, and Rob wiped down his torso with a wet cloth, inspecting himself for new wounds. Aside from a few bruises and a smattering of scratches, Rob wasn't in too bad a state. He placed on his surcoat, before exiting the tent. It had been late afternoon when the tourney had finished, and now it was early evening. The stars were just beginning to peek through in the sky and the horizon was painted in a myriad of pinks, oranges and reds. "Come join us," Willis boomed when he emerged. "This venison is among the finest I have tasted." Rob smiled gratefully at the air to White Harbor, before shaking his head and turning away. "I need to clear my head. I'll be back in a little bit." Willis shrugged and returned to his venison and wine, while Rob strode off to find some peace and quiet. His walk took him through the sprawling camp, until he was atop a hill overlooking it all. It gave him a fine view of the lands around, as well as the lone figure following him up the path. Rob tensed and loosened the dagger in its scabbard at his waist, while the figure made their way up towards him. They were wrapped in a black cloak with a cowl that covered their form and hid their face in shadows. It was only when the figure was almost next to him that he recognized who it was. "Queen Margaery," he greeted, with a dip of his head. She tilted her head up to look at him, and Rob smiled at her warmly. She smiled back shyly, her dark hair framing her pretty face. "Lord Rob," she greeted back with a coy smile. "Where is your lord husband?" Rob asked as he looked around. "Does he often let his queen run around without an escort?" Margaery laughed softly. "No, he doesn't." She shrugged then, "But I doubt Renly will be missing me at this hour." Rob replied, "I don't know many men who wouldn't be missing their lady wives at this time of evening." Margaery shrugged and looked over her shoulder. "Renly is at war. There will be time enough for that in peace. If Renly makes it to the peace, that is." "You don't think he will?" She said it as a statement, not a question. Rob smiled grimly. "No. He won't." "What makes you so certain?" Margaery asked. "Renly is a true king, in name and countenance." Rob laughed at that. "And yet kings are coming to be as common as lords now. Renly is but one of 5 kings, and easily the least of them." "The least?" Margaery cried, anger clouding her soft features. "The least?" Rob growled back. "R'hllor Arryn is waging a war and winning, while even Balon Greyjoy is beginning to stir on his isles. What he plans to do is anybody's guess, but it won't be good for anyone that doesn't have salt and iron flowing through their veins. Joffrey, boy and coward he may be, but he holds the legal claim and the Iron Throne, something which your husband doesn't have at all." Rob shivered. "And Stannis?" "Stannis is the greatest and most dangerous of them all. With Torrhen Snow by his side, all of Westeros should be trembling." "And what has Renly done?" Rob asked with a sneer. "He's sat here playing at war, hosting tourneys and wasting enough resources to fuel my father's armies for a year. Stannis has a pirate prince." Margaery scoffed. "Pirates are good for raiding, but not for war." "Torrhen is no pirate," Rob replied. "Torrhen is a dangerous man, with more power than any man has the right to wield. As long as Stannis has him by his side, Stannis has the advantage in this war. Torrhen has ships, I will give him that, but so do we," Margaery boasted. "We have all the strength of the Shield Islands and the Arbor and the Mandaya behind us, close to 300 ships." Rob roared with laughter at that statement. "Do you know who Torrhen's father is?" Margaery shook her head. "Not off the top of my head. Pirates don't interest me, bastard pirates interest me even less." "Byrne Saltstock," Rob told her. "And Byrne claims that Torrhen is 10 times the admiral that he ever was." "Do you know what Byrne is famed for?" "Sinking the Red Wine Fleet," Margaery replied in a small voice. "During the siege of Storm's End." "I." Rob glanced off to the river, where he could see the outlines of a few river barges resting on its banks. He was outnumbered 2-1. Odds could be worse, but they were still pretty formidable. And he won. He won with the help of sorcery. Margaery scoffed. My father spoke of that night often. He spoke of a monster that came out of the water and swallowed the ship's whole. Robb chuckled gently. I see your father has a penchant for tales too. I've met your monster. In the north we call him Willy. He's quite a friendly chap. Friendly? Are you jesting with me? Margaery looked at him askew. Torrhen Snow doesn't have one of those, does he? I don't know. Robb replied, but I've always assumed they don't call him the Black Leviathan for nothing. Margaery narrowed her eyes at him. Now I know you're jesting with me. Leviathans don't exist. Robb only shrugged in reply. Maybe they don't, perhaps they do. It's a big world out there, and I've only seen one very small corner. Perhaps somewhere out there is leviathans and dragons and 100 other mythical beasts. Who knows? Perhaps to them, humans are mere myths. Margaery giggled softly. What a strange notion. She told him. Almost as strange as you being married to a sword swallower. Robb's statement cut through the air like a sword, and Margaery stared at him with wide eyes. Robb reached up and brushed a stray strand of hair away. I know 1,000 men that would die to hold a woman like you in their arms. Don't. Margaery snapped sharply as she slapped his hand away. I don't care to hear your lies, regardless of what truths you think you know. At this Robb laughed. Then you're wiser than all the other women I have lain with. And has it been many? She challenged him. Enough. Robb shrugged. Most of them are falling over themselves as soon as I say that very line. And most women are fools, little more than pawns in a game. Margaery huffed. I don't want to be a pawn though. I want to be more than that. You want to be a queen? No, Margaery told him. I want to be the queen. At this Robb smiled sadly. Well, best of luck to you then. With a husband like yours though, I doubt you will be one long. You think this kingdom is doomed? Margaery asked him, her eyes searching his. Robb smiled strangely. It felt half a sneer, quarter of a smirk and all loathing. We have a name for kingdoms such as your lord husband's, Lady Margaery. What do you mean? Margaery asked, her soft features creased into a frown. In the north we call kingdoms such as this one a summer kingdom. A summer kingdom. Robb replied, his voice grave. A summer kingdom, held together by a summer crown and protected by the Knights of Summer. He gestured around him at the sprawling camp. On the evening breeze matters of conversation and laughter drifted to the place where they both stood, overwatching it all. They laugh and jest now, and they speak of the glories to come. They speak of the battles they will fight in, the men they will kill and the wars they will win. When the cold winds rise though, when the hard times come, these knights will fall and die like flies. My husband's host numbers 100,000 men. They will not fall or die easily. Margaery boasted. They will. Robb assured her, they are treating this war as a tourney, where much honor and glory and riches are to be won. They don't understand. War is no tourney. There's no riches to be won, only lost. What would you know of war? Margaery scorned him, you're a boy of 16, scarce older than me. You've seen no wars, known no battles and killed no men. Who are you to lecture men such as these on war and battle? No, Robb replied softly, his voice sad. I haven't seen a true war. I know men who have though. He shuddered involuntarily. Their stories didn't leave me wanting to fight in war, only hoping I would never see one. Robb turned to Margaery and looked at her by the light of the moon. He smiled sadly at her. And yet, here I am. Seeing a war I never hoped to. Margaery's frown softened under Robb's sad gaze, and she turned to observe the sprawling mass of men before her. No one wants to see war. She told him, least of all me or my family. The Reach has always been famed for chivalry, not killing. But as you said, it is here, and we must deal with it nonetheless. War can always be avoided. Robb replied. All it requires is men to sit down and talk. Then tell your father to come and talk. Margaery challenged him. Tell him to come and talk to Renly, and how together they will forge a greater kingdom than any other kingdom that has come before, or shall come after. With your father's armies and my husband's own, none will be able to stand against us. Robb looked Margaery in her eyes, his eyes hard. Rhaegar made the same offer to my grandfather, I am told. Rhaegar spoke to my grandfather of a dynasty that would last 1,000 years, of how their names would be written into the history books, of how Westeros would become the center of the world, its name known as far as the lands beyond the Jade Sea. Robb paused and sat down on the grass, and Margaery followed suit. And what did your grandfather tell Rhaegar in reply? Robb smiled wryly. Isn't it obvious? I guess. Margaery replied with a small smile of her own, but surely he must have spoken more words than just a no. He must have had words other than just a simple no to share with Rhaegar. He never liked to speak of the war. Robb shifted and lay down upon the soft grass. I only ever heard him speak of Rhaegar to me and my brother once. He told us what Rhaegar's last words were. And what were they? Margaery queried, her doe's eyes holding his captive. Were they a last declaration of his love for a woman? A regret perhaps? A word of wisdom? Nothing of the sort. Robb replied. All he ever said, was only a dragon can kill a dragon. Robb frowned. That was all he had to say from the Trident to King's Landing, even as my grandfather plunged his black blade into his heart, allegedly. Margaery frowned. Only a dragon can kill a dragon. What does that mean? Robb shrugged. I don't know. Neither did my grandfather. Were they words of knowledge or the mumblings of a madman? Who knows? Rhaegar is dead, and so too his legacy. Let it all rest. The Targaryens are gone. They are gone, and I would prefer to leave it that way. Fair enough. Margaery replied with a shy smile, before she collapsed down onto the grass next to him. Let us speak of something happier. Tell me of what you wanted to be before the war came. Before the war came? Robb asked. I wanted to be the Lord of Winterfell. I wanted to be a king. I wanted to be the greatest Northman to have ever lived. They were the dreams of a child though, and we are living in the realms of men now. Margaery looked at him askew. By the gods you are grim. Robb burst into peals of laughter at the young queen's statement. Grim. My friends find me to be very light-hearted, I will have you know. My own brother considers me to be little more than a japing fool. Margaery laughed back at him, before getting back to her feet. I must be gone before I am missed. She told him. I wanted to make my own measure of the envoy of the Lord of Winterfell. Robb waggled his eyebrows at her. And have you? He asked. She smiled at him but didn't deign to respond, before shrugging her dark cloak back on, and turning away. Just for a second, as she turned, the starlight reflected back at him in her doe's eyes, while her soft lips were curled into a knowing smirk and Robb's breath hitched in his throat. She was different, this girl. I warned you. Robb told her, days later as the lords and soldiers packed their tents. She looked at him, and for the first time he saw uncertainty in her doe's eyes. They are yet to fall. She told him. Look at them. She said as she pointed at her brother and the king, side by side. There rides the chivalry of the Reach and the strength of the Stormlands. There rides two corpses. Robb replied, even if they do not know it yet. With Roderick Greyjoy on the Shield Islands sits the raiders and reavers of the Iron Islands. Tried and tested warriors, each and every one. Many of them are the veterans of 100 battles in Essos, most of them with the Company of the Rose. My brother fears no Ironborn, tried and tested, greybeard or even ones as green as grass. She challenged, iron in her tones. As you said, they are raiders and reavers, not warriors and knights. Winter is coming, Margaery. And with winter, this summer kingdom shall come to an end. She threw him a reproachful look. Why do you only spew prophesies of our doom? Is there nothing you see here that makes you think that we will survive the trials to come? There is plenty. Robb replied, it is not your strength I doubt, but rather the weakness of your foes. She threw him a last look of anger, before turning and striding away. Lord Robb. He heard, and he turned to see Renly striding towards him, dressed in green and gold armor. Will you ride with us for the Shield Islands? Will you defend this realm from the enemies that besiege it? Robb shook his head, with a look of deep regret on his face. "Unfortunately not, Your Grace. Balon Greyjoy and my uncle Brandon were said to be the closest of friends. I have no wish to draw ire from the living or dead by besmirching my blade with the blood of the Ironborn." Renly smiled sadly, before nodding and extending a hand. "This is farewell then. I shall see when I return to march my infantry on King's Landing." "You will, Your Grace," Robb replied. "Until then, good fortune in the wars to come." Notes. Leave me a comment and let me know what you think. To the dickheads who took all the toilet paper, fuck you. I've been to 8 stores today looking for toilet paper and I can't find it anywhere. Chapter 28, Tommen I, The Ways of War. Summary. Tommen goes to war. Notes. Sorry if this chapter is a little confusing, but I've tried to keep it within Tommen's POV, who at this point in time is very young. And sorry for the delay. But here it is. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. When Tommen had first met Alaric he had thought he was cruel and bitter and not a little unlike Joffrey. Alaric's eyes were often squinted in anger and his lips seemed to be curled in a permanent scowl. It wasn't until Artos Stark, Alaric's older brother, had introduced the two of them properly that Tommen had discovered that perhaps there was more to Alaric Stark than met the eye. Tommen found that behind the bitter sneers and angry snarls was someone who cared deeply for his family, and had a love for wolves that rivaled Tommen's love for kittens. Their slowly blossoming friendship had been cemented when Alaric had gifted Tommen with a Shadowcat cub. Tommen had named it Sir Pounce and it was the only Shadowcat that any of the wolves that prowled throughout Winterfell seemed to be kind to. The howls of wolves and screams of the Shadowcats often echoed around the city as they fought with one another. Alaric had told Tommen that the wargs who controlled such animals had to be kept in separate barracks because often they would start fighting too. Alaric had told him that often the nature of a warg's companion could bleed into the warg, just as the warg's nature could bleed into his companion. Tommen had stopped letting Sir Pounce sleep on his bed after that, though it was most probably for the best. Sir Pounce had very sharp claws that tore up all the cushions. The maid didn't like it when Sir Pounce tore up the cushions. "Tommen!" Sir Oswell cried as he rapped him across the head with his wooden training sword. "Focus!" In the corner Sir Pounce took personal offense and came bounding over, his chubby little belly wiggling funnily. It leapt up and managed to snag the end of Sir Oswell's coat, before growling and hissing and trying to pull Sir Oswell to the ground. Sir Oswell clicked his tongue in annoyance, before gripping the little Shadowcat cub by the scruff of his neck and lifting him off the floor. Sir Pounce growled and tried to bat at Sir Oswell with his paws, but he couldn't reach. Tommen couldn't help but giggle, only adding to Sir Oswell's annoyance. "Stupid cat!" he muttered as he flung it away into a nearby hay bale. "Stupid northerners! Stupid oversized pets!" he grumbled. "Focus, Tommen," he barked, before turning to find Alaric, but Alaric had already gone. In the corner, his direwolf pup, Walton, was being chased by the cook. It most probably had something to do with the oversized haunch of meat that it had clutched in its mouth. Sir Oswell sighed in exasperation. "Why did I ever agree to this? Why don't I get to guard the intelligent, coherent older brother? Why am I stuck with the 8-year-olds? He sighed and turned away. "It was the same when I was in the Kingsguard," he continued as he walked away. "I always got the shit jobs. Sir Oswell, go and find some food. Sir Oswell, go and set up camp. Sir Oswell, go guard the king as he enters the whorehouse. And make sure you don't get distracted too." Sir Oswell's voice drifted away as he left and with a start, he noticed that Sir Oswell had given up on them. He turned around looking for Alaric, but he couldn't see him anywhere. He couldn't have gone far, could have he? "Alaric!" he called tentatively. "Alaric, where are you?" "Up here." He heard Alaric cry, and he looked up to see him crouched on the roof of the armory, his white raven perched on his shoulder. "What are you doing up there?" Tommen asked. "Bad news has come," Alaric replied as he watched the Maestas Tower. "Look." He pointed and Tommen turned to see a flurry of black ravens flying forth from the tower. "Do you reckon my mother and father are all right?" Tommen asked. "Myrcella will be fine, won't she?" Alaric looked down at him, but didn't respond. After a moment, he rose to his feet. What happened to Sir Oswell? He left. Alaric grunted and swung over the side of the roof, before scaling the wall and jumping to the ground. Come, he said as he strode past him, let's go to the Godswood. Tommen trotted after him, and Sir Pounce pursued them both. They walked in silence. Something was wrong. Alaric had guessed it from the master's tower, and now they saw he was right. They passed by the guard barracks where men were shouting and saddling horses. In the blacksmith Mickon and all his apprentices were hard at work, fitting men and sharpening swords. What's going on? Tommen asked Alaric. Something is wrong. Alaric repeated stubbornly. Then he paused and his face filled with concern. Maybe John has been hurt. They came to the gates of the Godswood and Alaric gestured for Tommen to be quiet. Together, the two of them came to the great weirwood where they found figures huddled around the tree, arguing. Lord Stark was there, as was the Lady Ashura. So too was Artois and a small man that Tommen did not recognize. Tommen went to greet them, but Alaric grasped him by the arm and pulled him into the shadows. How could have this happened? Lord Stark was saying, you told me he was dead. The small man scowled. That is what I was told too. You are meant to make sure that the reports you receive are true, and clearly the one you gave me was not. I'm sure Bowen didn't deliberately make the mistake. Lady Ashura interrupted. Of course not. Artois cried, no one is disputing whether or not his incompetence wasn't deliberate, but the North is still burning because of it. He failed at his task. The small man sneered at the young lorderling, before a snake had slithered out of his cape and draped itself around his neck. It hissed at Artois and spat venom. I won't take insults from a boy so green he pisses grass. Enough. Lord Stark snapped. It has happened. Fighting amongst ourselves does no one good. We need John back, father. Artois said as he turned to Lord Stark. The Wall and the Night's Watch can hold the Wildings. We need him back to fight the Targaryens. Next to him, Alaric stiffened. Tommen looked at him, confused. The Targaryens were meant to be dead and gone. Father had told him so. So too had mother. Viserys Targaryen is the greater threat. The small man agreed. He must be dealt with as soon as possible. Lady Ashura rubbed her temples. How did this happen? Where are all the skin changers under your command? In the south, my lady. Bowen replied. That or watching Lucerys Valerian wing his way into the Bight. And Kyle Waterman? She asked. Where is he? In the Bay of Crickens. Lord Stark told her, his voice grave. Along with half of our eastern fleet. Artois groaned and put his head in his hands. This is horrible. Do we know where Viserys is now? He should be within a day or two from Ramsgate. Do they know he is coming? Lord Stark asked. I don't know. Bowen replied. Riders, ravens and wargs have been sent, but I have no way of knowing if any of them have arrived. Lord Stark sighed and turned to look at the great weirwood that stretched into the sky behind them. At the bottom of the tree the skull grinned up at him, as if it was laughing at Lord Stark's sadness. This is a tragedy. He said. Not since before the conquest have enemies set foot on northern soil. We must rebuff him, and fast. We need to set a perimeter now, and stop him and his men from breaching it. How much land shall we be prepared to lose though? Artois asked. It is not the land I am worried about. Lord Stark replied. Land can be reclaimed, it is the people. Most of our population lives on the prime farmland that is in the region that Viserys Targaryen has just attacked. It will take perhaps a year or two to reclaim the land from destruction. It will take decades to replace those people. We must evacuate them all, before Viserys turns inland and wreaks havoc upon them. Yes. Artois exclaimed. We need to move them all. We'll tell them to pack up and leave. Head for the big cities and hold fasts. White Harbor, the Hornwood, Old Castle, Hellhold and Bloody Hall. What they can't take, they will need to burn. Bowen warned. Anything they leave behind, Viserys will use. The cost though, Lady Ashura muttered. It will be astronomical, and winter is coming. Lord Stark looked up. Order Lord Bolton to march down and reinforce the Hornwood. Tell him to stop Viserys from marching further north at all costs. Order Galbart Glover to march and reinforce Torrens Square. The Winter City and Barrowton must muster all our forces. We will be the perimeter. Viserys cannot be allowed to break further into the north. And those in between. What of White Harbor? As Artos said, they need be evacuated. Lord Stark said. Send the Winter Wolves out. They are to make sure that all the villages and towns are fully abandoned. No one gets left behind. They will need to take them to all the major holdfasts and cities. That will put a large strain on supplies. Lady Ashura warned. We may not be able to feed them all. We will. Lord Stark replied. Open the winter granaries. Use them. Lady Ashura looked absolutely aghast. But they are for. I know. Lord Stark groaned. But what choice do we have? Hopefully we can expel Viserys quickly enough to put in another harvest before winter comes. We must call Jon home. Artos said. We need him, and the great Jon too. Lord Stark turned to Bowen, who shrugged. He is at the Fist of the First Men now. It will take a moon's turn to see him back at the wall, and then another moon's turn to have him back here, and then another moon's turn to see him with an army marching against Viserys. We do not have time for that. Lord Stark. I shall lead the armies, as is my duty. We will have to do without them. We shall call for the rest of the Weirwood warriors though. They shall attend us, and serve against Viserys for us. They broke his brother's armies, they can break his too. Done. Bowen said as he turned to leave. I shall order word sent at once. Bowen rushed away and Lord Stark turned to Artos. Go and gather your arms and armor. You will be riding with me against them when the time comes. Artos grinned like a fool and leapt into the air. Lady Ashura made a small sound of protest, but it died in her throat when Alaric stepped out of the bushes they had been hiding in. Alaric! She cried, what are you doing here? And is that you too, Tommen? Tommen crept out from the bushes too and smiled up at her sheepishly. She marched over and slapped Alaric across the back of the hand. You shouldn't be eavesdropping. Or you, Tommen. It doesn't matter. Lord Stark said. It is better if Tommen knows what he rides to war for. As one, all of them turned to stare at Lord Stark incredulously. You can't mean to take Tommen to war, can you? I do. Lord Stark replied, his voice quiet. Tommen is a prince of the realm and my squire. He must learn of war sooner or later. I would have him learn of it now, so unlike my sons he learns the truth of it and sees no glory in it. And that was that. Tommen was going to war. The Lady Ashura yelled and hissed at Lord Stark, but he wouldn't be moved. Alaric begged to come as well, but Lord Stark bent to Lady Ashura on that and he wasn't going. This only served to upset Alaric even more, and he had spent 2 whole days on the roof of the broken tower because of it. No one could get him down, and he eventually only came down because Artos threatened to ride off to war and die without saying goodbye to him. The next week was filled with rushing men, snorting horses and swords training from Sir Oswell and Lord Stark when they could spare time from him. Most of his time though was spent with Alaric and Artos though, speaking about what was happening and how father would be arriving with the armies of the south at any moment. Artos said that Myrcella would come to keep him company and that Joffrey would be left in King's Landing. Mother would come too, he said, and Uncle Jaime would kill Viserys just like he killed the Mad King. Alaric said very little, preferring to spend his days climbing the walls and toying with the Valyrian steel dagger that he said he stole from father. Ravens were arriving with news almost on the hour, and little of it seemed to be good. Viserys had taken Ramsgate and sacked all the lands south of the Hornwood. One minute he was marching with his full strength on White Harbor, and then he was marching with half his strength against the Hornwood, and then he changed his mind and decided to march against White Harbor again. Many of the reports Lord Stark received contradicted each other, and the most ludicrous that Tommen had heard was that Viserys was striking for Moat Cailin. Tommen was just a boy, but he had never seen a formidable castle than Moat Cailin. The week came to an end however, and one morning Tommen woke up and saw an entire army assembled on the plains outside of the Winter City. Then Lord Stark came to see him, and he was being made a set of little armor and a little sword, and he was given a horse too, a real horse, not a pony. You keep care of my father and brother for me. Alaric told him when he was being fitted with his new-made armor. I can't lose them. Especially Arto's. Look after him. Don't let him die. Alaric had been on the brink of tears, and his voice shook. Tommen had nodded seriously. I promise. He said solemnly. I won't let them die. I'll die first. No, Alaric had cried. Don't let any of you die. All of you come back. I don't want to be left alone here again. You won't be left alone. Tommen had said, you'll have Arya and Deanna. But he was wrong about that too. The next morning Arya and Deanna were gone as well, along with a man called Ethan Glover. Tommen had never been scared of Lord Stark before, but he was with him when they got the news, and Lord Stark had almost decapitated the poor man who brought the news. He had cursed Ethan Glover, his own father, and Arya and Deanna too. He had wept and wailed and cursed and cried before retreating to his own chambers. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Lord Stark emerged from his chambers in iron and furs with ice in his hands. He had come to Tommen's chambers, helped him dress in his armor, and then together they made their way to the courtyard where Artois awaited them along with all the captains of the army. They said some words, prayed a prayer, and then they all marched to war. Notes. Leave me a review, and help me gather enough energy to write the next chapter, which will be from Jon's perspective. Chapter 29, Jon 7, The Fist of the First Men. Summary. Jon arrives at the Fist of the First Men. Notes. Warning, long author's note. Before I begin, I would like to thank everyone who commented on the last chapter. I was very inspired and thankful for the time and care you put into them, and the way that all of you had a piece of constructive criticism to share with me on what you did and didn't like about the last chapter. Thank you. It is for comments like those that I write, comments that help me to grow as a writer and storyteller. Regarding Viserys' arc, I do agree with you that up until now he has had a large amount of plot armor, particularity regarding how he got to the north. However, I do disagree with the accusations of plot armor past his arrival at Widow's Watch. Viserys arrived surprising and unexpectedly, greatly contributing to his victory there. As explained in earlier chapters, most of the North's eastern fleet was reassigned from that region, some to the Bay of Cricons, others further south to watch Lucerys Valerian's fleet wing its way into the Bight. As to all the North's wargs, most of them are split into two legions. The first is primarily used for war, not for spying, while the second is the spy unit. Pretty much all of the spy wargs are either in the south watching the War of the Five, now 6, Kings, or in Essos. As to Viserys' victories past Widow's Watch that are unfeasible, I disagree. The last chapter was written from Tommen's chapter, and he may not be the most accurate POV in this series. He is 8 at the time after all, and I am trying to keep his POVs in the same vein as that of an 8-year-old. Secondly, the meeting in the Godswood was the first meeting Ned had about Viserys, yet it was not the last. As stated in the chapter by Tommen, there was a whole week in between that meeting and Ned and Tommen riding for war. In that time, Ned spent a lot of time revising plans and planning how to deal with Viserys, much of which you will see in the chapters to come. A last thing I want you to consider is that all you know of Viserys has come from Tommen and Viserys' POVs. I have already stated that Tommen is not the most accurate POV, but Viserys is arrogant and does tend to think highly of himself, thus your opinions of what Viserys is. Look at what he has achieved beyond Widow's Watch at this point in time and you will notice it is very little. Anyway, thank you all for the comments and please leave more like them, they are really appreciated. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. At Craster's Keep they had been a strong party of 1,112 men. Now they numbered just below 1,000. Death, division and disunity had splintered them apart quicker than any wildling host could have. It was at Craster's that they had split. The morn that Craster was killed, his uncle Benjen had mustered all the men loyal to him and left. The only one of his men he had left behind was Qorin Halfhand. You are a foolish boy, he had rebuked as he rode away, but I have no intention of returning your corpse to my brother. You will not listen to my counsel, but I beg you listen to his. If you do, you might just survive this fool's quest yet. Jon hadn't responded, instead watched him in stony silence. The great Jon hadn't been so silent. His wrath had been fearsome to behold. Oathbreaker. He had roared at Uncle Benjen, wildling lover. Traitor! The insults had been many, but the Hardstark had weathered them all with icy indifference as he rode away. The next to go was Sam. "Where we are going is no place for women, Sam," Jon had told him as Craster's wives and daughters had filed out of his ramshackle keep. "You started them down this path, Sam. You will finish it with them. Take 10 of the Winter Wolves and Benton Hellstark and ride for the wall. You will be enough. We know there are no wildings in between here and there," Jon had instructed him. "What then?" Sam had asked. "Go home," Jon had told him. "Your time with me is done. It is time for you to return to your father and become the lord we all know you are." Samwell Tarly had stared at him stoically for a moment, before breaking down into tears and clasping him in a bear hug. "I'll miss you," he had told him. "You'll have to come visit me down south someday. The air's much warmer down there." Jon had laughed. "So warm, I think I'd melt." Sam had laughed too, and then he was gone as well, along with Benton Hellstark and 10 Winter Wolves. And so they had become 987. 2 days later a Winter Wolf was thrown from his saddle while scouting and died of a broken neck. That night, 2 black brothers got into an argument and ended up drawing knives. One of them slashed the other's neck and Lord Commander Mormont was forced to slash the survivor. And so they had become 984. The next day, a pack of gaunt wolves attacked a group of black brothers as they were foraging for food. They beat them off, but not before one of them had been vanquished. The men began to mutter. Craster's curse, they called it. The gods were punishing them, the Winter Wolves were muttering. It was the price for slaying Craster under his own roof, the black brothers grumbled. Jon had caught more than one of them glaring at him as they rode past him and the Lord Commander. Lord Commander Mormont had been most wrathful himself. "If you were one of my men, boy, I would have ripped the head from your shoulders for that. I came to Craster's keep in good faith, partook of his bread and salt and drank of his mead. I slept under his roof. You sullied my honor and the honor of all my men with what you did." If he was being honest with himself, Jon was just glad that the men of the Night's Watch had stayed. He had been worried they were going to march back to the wall too. Jon knew the Weirwood warriors were good, but the cost of facing off against a wilderling horde with them and the Winter Wolves alone would have taken their toll on all of them. If any other parts of his force abandoned him, Jon would be forced to return to his father without breaking any of the wilderling hosts and with his tail tucked between his legs. The shame would be painful, but losing so many fine men for a pointless stand would be even more so. Was I wrong? He had asked Roderick Walton a few days later. Are the gods punishing us? Perhaps. Roderick replied. Perhaps not. As for the gods, he who dares to claim to know their will is often the first to be struck down. Mistakes have been made, Lord Jon, and not all of them by you. Focus on the wars, Jon, not the battles. Craster was but a battle. Mance Rayder is the war. The next morning it was found that a Winter Wolf by the name of Boar had gone missing overnight. It was then that whispered mutters became the spoken word. We must head back. A black brother with boils all over his face cried, the gods have cursed us. We partook of his bread and salt. A Winter Wolf whined, and we slew him. What did we think would happen? Mor's castle had been there when the grumbling began, and he had simply drawn his sword and lain it at Jon's feet. My sword is yours, my lord. His wolves had come and lay down at his feet too, all 10 of them. My wolves as well. From this day to your last day. Your enemies are my enemies, your friends are my friends. If gods have cursed you, let them curse me too. If men wish to fight you, let them fight me first. That had done wonders for stopping the Winter Wolves from complaining, but the Black Brothers still whined. Surprisingly, it was Lord Commander Mormont and Thorin Halfhand who had convinced them to go on. Brothers, Mormont had called, men of the Night's Watch. His men had quietened to listen to him. Mance Rayder lies somewhere to the north of us. He means to break the wall and bring Red War to the 7 kingdoms. Well, that's a game 2 can play. Why turn back when we can bring the war to him? There are thousands of them. Someone called. We'll die. Cried another. Die, screamed Mormont's raven, flapping its black wings. Die, die, die. Many of us. The old bear said. mayhaps, even all of us. But as another Lord Commander said 1,000 years ago, that is why they dress us in black. Remember your words, brothers. For we are the swords in the darkness, the watchers on the walls, Thorin Halfhand had cried as he raised his voice. The fire that burns against the cold. Sir Malador Locke drew his longsword. The light that brings the dawn, others answered, and more swords were pulled from scabbards. Then all of them were drawing, and it was near 300 upraised swords, and as many voices crying, the horn that wakes the sleepers. The shield that guards the realms of men. After that, and Jon cracking open one of the casks of wine, most of the men of the Night's Watch seemed to find some courage.